Welcome back. John Zannis here, joined by Brad Kelly, Evan Lazar. Alex Barth had to take a powder, do some 98.5 stuff, as he's been known to do. So Alex may be joining us later on in the evening, closer to the Patriots pick or after, and who knows. But this is really where things get super interesting. We're through picks 1 and 2. Obviously, no surprises. Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson. I do want to hear from you guys and your thoughts on these guys a little bit before we get into it. But I mean, the intrigue here is what it is. And it's amazing where, there are 3 minutes left to go on the clock here. We still have no idea which direction the Niners are going to go. And this is going to affect obviously what happens with the Patriots, what happens with a lot of people. So guys, make your predictions right now. If your gut, you're still saying Mac Jones?
I still say Mac Jones, but there was a lot of push this morning for Trey Lance for the 49ers. And I think this is a battle between the head coach and the football guys and the coaching staff versus the front office. And this is oftentimes what we see in the draft is that the scouts and the general manager, they can look at the big picture bird's eye view from 30,000 feet, where they can say, okay, the better play here in the long term is somebody like Trey Lance, who we can develop and in 3 or 4 years might be an MVP caliber quarterback. Whereas with Mac Jones, we might be better right now with Mac Jones, but our ceiling is capped with that player. And that's what the front office looks at it. The coaching staff says, we know that we can plug Mac Jones into our system and get the type of performance that we want out of the quarterback position. So we want the ready-made, the safe bet with Mac Jones. And they've been sort of at odds. And this is really where the draft starts, as everybody kind of has said already. And the 3rd pick and the 4th pick, those 2 picks are going to set the stage for the rest of the first round. Because if 2 quarterbacks get past those picks, and then Trey Lance and Mac Jones, or Trey Lance and Justin Fields, or whatever it ends up being, are still on the board, then teams like the Patriots, teams like the Chicago Bears, teams like the Washington football team, teams like the New Orleans Saints, they're going to start calling these teams that are going to have picks that are not taking QBs. So that's really where it's going to be a lot of fun, is if those 2 quarterbacks, if 2 of the 3 quarterbacks remaining stay on the board past pick 4, then things are going to get really interesting about who's going to start to trade up and who's going to get aggressive to go ahead and get those guys that are left.
And let's the picks in. So your thoughts here, Brad, right before it comes in. You going Lance or Jones?
I'll go Trey Lance, and I really think that as much as the draft might, start at pick 3 because we don't know who's being selected. Kind of what Evan said. The Falcons are the team we don't know if they're taking a quarterback or not at pick 4. So that's really what I think.
Lance.
Wow. So this is a scenario that I had heard this morning.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Brad. I just
That's
saw
fine.
it cross.
No, go ahead.
No, and this is a scenario that I saw this morning, that the Niners had really started to zero in on Trey Lance. And I had heard, and we'll see if it ends up happening, but I had heard that the Patriots were going to be interested in trading up from Jones if he was not the pick for San Francisco. So now I'm really starting to, my ears perk up and say, okay, this is really starts to get a little bit real for New England here, because I have been told that Justin Fields was their guy for a long time. Today, it's sort of changed a little bit to Mac Jones from the people that I was talking to, which makes me think that the Justin Fields thing was a smokescreen, and the Patriots wanted everybody to think that they were all in on Justin Fields. And really, now that we're getting closer to the draft, it was Nick Saban's guy all along, right? It was Mac Jones all along. But in terms of the 49ers, and Brad, we can get into this a little bit. We talked about it in the pre-draft, though. It just didn't make sense to give up all of that and all that bag of goods for a quarterback like Mac Jones, who was really a floor prospect, really a guy that you were coming in and we're getting basically durable Jimmy G is what you were kind of hoping out of it. This is a much higher level prospect in terms of arm talent, mobility, and just playmaking skill from the quarterback position.
But let me ask you guys, and the whole idea behind the Patriots Jimmy G conversation was, if it's Lance, then it makes more sense for San Francisco to wait. To wait it out with Jimmy. I still think that's ludicrous. I don't see any world in which it happens. If you drafted a guy this high, ultimately you want him to be the starter this year. It's not cap. It's not anything. It's real money. An owner has to actually give somebody $25 million to be a backup. It's a lot of freaking money. I don't see a world in which that works. I think you could cut Jimmy G and go grab somebody off the street who could be a professional quarterback if you wanted to, or swing something for something cheaper and have somebody in the fold who's the veteran in case Lance can't can't tie his own shoes for the first 3 months of the season if that's the case. But you disagree, Evan. You think this makes it more likely that Jimmy stays?
I think it definitely makes it more likely that Jimmy stays. I think this makes it more likely that the Patriots might trade up for a quarterback, because the two guys that we talked all offseason about that were linked to New England were Justin Fields and Mac Jones. And those are the two guys that are still on the board right now. If there was any time for the Patriots to actually do this and do something that's uncharacteristically aggressive for the way that they typically approach the draft, now is it. And I love Trey Lance. I think he is a great prospect. I think there's some issues that they have to work out in terms of his mechanics and his downfield accuracy to be more consistent in that regard. But this is a guy that can make so many different throws, that can do so many different things with his mobility. And I really fell in love with Trey Lance the second I turned on the tape from him in 2019 and was like, this is a first round quarterback prospect. This is everything that you want in a first round quarterback prospect. It's a ball of clay, right? It certainly is a ball of clay, but Kyle Shanahan's a really good coach, and I think that he's the right guy to take that on.
Yeah. So I'm not going to pretend I'm a film guy like the two of you, but Lance was my kind of secret. Oh, please let him be the guy who slides. And as the San Francisco it started to tick up that he was going to go there at 3. I was definitely getting bummed. If I joined you guys on the pre-show, my bold prediction would have been the Patriots get a crack at one of the top 5 quarterbacks and pass on them. That's my bold prediction. But Brad, let's get your take here. You got 2 guys left in here. If you had your pick, your druthers, Jones or Fields for the Patriots, and how far up are you willing to go?
It's Justin Fields by far for me. I have Justin Fields as the number 2 quarterback in this class, and I think that Mac Jones is a clear, multiple tiers lower. Kind of what Evan said, as far as the 49ers go, they were going to stay at pick 12. I think Mac Jones then would have made sense for them.
Right.
And you don't trade up for someone with a limited ceiling compared to the other players available. And I think that's ultimately what swayed them is, if we're going to trade up, we're going to give up these assets to move from pick 12 to pick 3, then, let's get the guy who has the ceiling. And I think that's what they see as Lance. As Evan said, too, there are some mechanical issues. So maybe he does, that overstriding that he showed on his film looked a little bit better at his pro day. But ultimately, if he is not ready to start week 1, I think now you're talking, it might be a training camp decision for the Niners whether or not they're going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo, to be honest, because maybe they are able to swing a trade.
Because they can. Yeah. And that's the thing with Jimmy is, again, everybody here I'm sure knows it, but this is a year-to-year deal. They can cut him for nothing. It's the dead cap is next to zero here. It's a couple $1 million. They absolutely control the strings. He could pout. I guess Jimmy could pout and just not show up, which is a problem. And I wouldn't be stunned if we get there, honestly, if something isn't worked out. So I don't think they have that leverage to hold him the whole way, because Garoppolo could just say, F it. No, go. Cut me and let me go to a camp right now where I can compete to be a starter, or trade me. Because, you're not going to string me along and cut me on friggin' August 31st. Like, that's ridiculous. So I think that that's possible. I do want to quickly move to Atlanta. Now, this could be a massive shakeup here. The assumption of course, is no quarterback here. They're going to ride it with Ryan. I'm dubious. I'm not so sure that's the case. Everyone's pointing Pitts here. And they think that's the play. Do you guys think that's where Atlanta's going, or you think we could get a curveball here?
I think we could definitely get a curveball, and it's a quarterback. But Pitts is the best player on the board that's not a quarterback, right? He's the best player available that's not a QB. Now, the issue that I see for Atlanta is that you have 2 quarterbacks left, in my opinion, in Justin Fields and Mac Jones, that sitting them for a year or 2 does them no good, right? These are 2 guys that can play right now, right away for their NFL teams. Maybe in both situations, you start a bridge guy for 6 games, 8 games, like similar to what the Miami Dolphins did for Tua last year. But you're not sitting Justin Fields for 2 years and letting Matt Ryan play out his contract. So if you're going to draft a guy like Justin Fields or Mac Jones, there's no good coming from it by sitting them on the bench. Now, if the Niners had taken Mac Jones and Trey Lance was still there, then you can talk me into them sitting Trey Lance for a year, letting Matt Ryan ride it out a little bit, and then revisiting the situation next offseason, and maybe you move Matt Ryan when his contract's a little bit easier to get out of. But to sit Justin Fields down for a year or 2 behind Matt Ryan makes 0 sense if you're at Falcons. It's just not a good investment. It's not a good use of the number 4 asset. Whereas if you take Kyle Pitts here, that really changes the complexion of your team in the short term. And then maybe next year or the year after that, when Matt Ryan's contract is more in a situation where it's expiring sooner, you then take your quarterback of the future. I think we're a year too early for the Falcons to take a QB because they're going to have this prized top 5 quarterback sitting on the bench behind a 38-year-old Matt Ryan. It just doesn't, the optics of it don't really make much sense unless it was going to be Trey Lance.
Yeah. Just as an aside here, Trey Lance did on an ESPN interview just say that he's very excited to learn from Jimmy Garoppolo, which is really funny. But Brad, your thoughts here on the Falcons? The pick is in, so again, we'll see. Is Pitts your guy?
Yeah,
I know you love Fields, but if you're them, what do you do?
Typically speaking, I would say, it's foolish to take a positional player over a quarterback the caliber of Justin Fields. Yeah. However, due to the situation that Evan just laid out, I think now you're talking about it making a little bit more sense.
Yeah. No trade, by the way. They kept the pick. There was always also the possibility someone could jump up. They did not. Atlanta is making the pick, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm usually against passing on a Justin Fields, who I think, go back 2 years, I would have had him as quarterback 1 over Kyler Murray. Like, he's that caliber of prospect in my eyes. So I think typically it's foolish, but if you have Matt Ryan on an uncuttable, untradeable contract for the next 2 seasons, it does not, like Evan said, does not make a lot of sense. You're not improving your team.
So it sounds like this pick is going to be Kyle Pitts.
It's Pitts. Yep. Sounds like it's Pitts.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I don't know if Arthur Smith's scheme is necessarily the one that needs this type of level of tight end, but he is such a generational talent that you can't fault the Falcons for taking Kyle Pitts here.
And here's the thing. Here's my opinion. When you're picking up here, if you don't have a desperate need like quarterback, which is really the one where you're going to go outside the box and not always take the best player available, if the quarterback is there and you need a quarterback, you'll take him over best available. I'd say the consensus here, and you guys have watched a ton of tape here, is Pitts was the number 2 player in the draft and one of the highest graded at his position in a long time, behind Trevor Lawrence here. So if you're picking up in these early spots, and I think the Patriots are going to have this philosophy as well, is you want a guy who can come in right now and be top 5, top 10 at their position today. If you're with these early picks at a particular position in order to justify drafting them this high. So if you have a cornerback that is Pro Bowl caliber, possibly on day 1, it makes sense to draft him. But my guess is the Patriots probably have, I don't know how many guys you guys grade out this way, which are not quite generational talents, but can't miss surefire talents. My guess is the Patriots have about 7 or 8 of these guys on their list. And if not one of them is available at 15, I'm guessing a trade down is a very likely scenario here. For Pitts, this is a can't miss guy that anybody who has a crack at it without a need at quarterback makes perfect sense that you would go get him.
And Brad, you can disagree with me if you want, but to me, 2020 Kyle Pitts was the best tape of any prospect I watched in this class. Like he was that good for Florida last year, where I felt like nobody had better tape out there last year than Kyle Pitts. So for the Falcons getting him here, you're not getting a tight end, and I think that's something that he gets labeled a tight end. You're getting an offensive weapon. This is a guy that can just as easily play outside receiver as he could play tight end. He can play detached from the formation. He can play with his hand in the dirt. He can do pretty much everything you want. You're getting a really just a weapon, a receiver, not necessarily a tight end. So this is a no-brainer for Atlanta, and if they continue to hang on to Julio Jones, and you put Julio Jones with Kyle Pitts, I mean, there's very few 1-2 punches in the NFL that are better than Kyle Pitts.
They also have a guy called Ridley.
Calvin Ridley. And
Ridley, who was
very good team. Yeah.
I think he had the most 20-yard plus receptions in the league. That's obscene right now. And this is almost an embarrassment of riches for this team at that position. But I don't know if this increases the likelihood of a Julio trade, because right now your next gen stars with Pitts and Ridley are just those 2 guys puts you in the upper echelon, of teams in terms of weapons for a quarterback to throw to, and that's without adding Julio, who's arguably the best receiver of the last decade. So that's just bananas right now.
I think it's
go ahead, Brad. I want to hear. Yeah, go ahead.
It could ultimately, as far as Julio Jones goes, come down to if they address wide receiver in this draft as well, because they also have Hayden Hurst at tight end, and he's pretty good. He had a really good, strong season for them. Kyle Pitts could be a hybrid tight end wide receiver, but if you're going to play Pitts at full-time wide receiver. I don't know if that's even necessarily the best use of his talents. You're really kind of like missing out on another pure wideout if you do trade Julio Jones. I would want to move Pitts around as a chess piece more than just sitting him on the outside of the formation every play, which I think you would have to do without Julio Jones there.
Fair enough.
So Cincinnati is sitting here at 5. I think it should be Penny Sewell, right? I think they should take the offensive lineman, protect the investment in Joe Burrow. It could be a wide receiver. We know the Patriots aren't trading with the Miami Dolphins at number 6. Once we get to Detroit at number 7, Bill Belichick, he might pick up the phone. I think that this is something that, a lot of Patriots fans can't wrap their head around. Bill Belichick actually trading all up 8 spots in a draft to take a quarterback is just so out of the realm of anything that we've seen him do in the past. But at some point, you have to look at these 2 quarterbacks that are sliding a little bit right now and say, these are franchise caliber. Maybe
where's
not
the
Mac
sweet
Jones.
spot? Right. Where do you come in?
Exactly. Where do you come in? Because everything out of Denver is all this Aaron Rodgers stuff is coming out. Ian Rappaport just tweeted a couple of minutes ago that the Packers still aren't moving Aaron Rodgers, that their plan is not to move Aaron Rodgers. So if that's the case, then okay. But Denver, go ahead.
Let me ask you this question real quick, Evan, or Brad or whomever. This is an interesting game of chess here with the Aaron Rodgers situation. If you're Denver and you think it's in play, you got to find out. You got to find out in the next 20 minutes if that's the case. You can't have what Houston did with Watson prior to all of his legal problems coming up with like, okay, but we're not going to trade you, and then just a staring contest there. Like they need to know right freaking now whether they're going to draft a quarterback if he's sitting there, or if they need to trade up. They might need to know yesterday. I mean, they might want to trade up to 6 right now aggressively if they're not going to get Aaron Rodgers. So how long can you wait this out? I feel like if it happens, it has to happen kind of now, doesn't it? So like in the next, like right now, like.
So the sweet spot that I've felt is number 8 with the Carolina Panthers, because I think it's at 5 and 6. I don't think you're getting you're definitely not getting quarterbacks there. Right. 7 with the Detroit Lions is a little bit of a wild card. I think that they're still going to commit to Jared Goff. They have him basically under contract for 2 more years.
I'm not saying for the Patriots. I'm saying for the Rodgers trade. If Denver's in play right now, they have to make this. It has to happen before Denver's. Yeah, you're going to make their pick.
Right. So I don't think Aaron Rodgers is getting traded tonight.
No.
I don't. I think that this is something that if he was getting traded tonight and they had him truly on the table, I don't see how the San Francisco 49ers make Trey Lance the 3rd overall pick in the draft and don't trade that pick for Aaron Rodgers at that point, right? That's what I would have done if I was San Francisco. You just turn around and you offer that pick to the Green Bay Packers and you get Aaron Rodgers, you get the MVP of the league. But I really feel like for the Patriots, they're not going to have to worry about a quarterback at 5. They're not going to have to worry about a quarterback at 6. I don't think they'll have to worry about a quarterback at 7, but even if they do, it might be the other guy. It might not even be the guy that they necessarily want. Right. So at 8 with Carolina, I think you need to start calling, because New Orleans, Chicago, the Washington football team, Pittsburgh, maybe once you start to get into that out of the top 10 range, and you're talking about 10, 11, 12, those teams are going to be able to start to be in the conversation. That's when they become a team that could do that. Can they trade all the way from the 20s all the way up to 8? Probably not, and make a better offer than you? Probably not. So I really, was kind of trying to convince myself that the Patriots weren't going to trade up for a quarterback tonight just to set myself up.
Chase. Looks like Jamar Chase.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a situation where I'm shocked by this one, because Brad, I'm sure you could give a full scouting report better than me on Jamar Chase, but Joe Burrow tears his ACL as a rookie, and you take a wide receiver that, granted, has a lot of connection with him and obviously has all the rapport in the world with him from 2019. I would have taken the tackle. I think that.
So a couple of things, just to touch quickly on what you were saying before we found out it was Jamar Chase of the Bengals. It's not only a sweet spot for the Patriots to trade up and not have to sacrifice all of that value, but where you were getting at is pick 8 is also the spot where teams behind them might be able to jump up above them. Yep. Like a team is not going to jump from 19 to pick 6 and try to take a quarterback, but they could jump to pick 8, which I think was what you were kind of alluding to, that needs to be magnified, because the Patriots will get, not want to say desperate, but that's the area where it's like we got to make a move if we're going to make a move. as far as Jamar Chase goes, I think the Bengals, I mean, they're passing on a tackle now. This is a very good offensive tackle class. It's also a very good wide receiver class. If they don't take one in the second round, I think that they're doing Joe Burrow a disservice because I don't think their weapons are really all that bad. When you have Tyler Boyd, who's very solid, T. Higgins on the outside as well, Joe Mixon at running back, I think Jamar Chase does add another like dynamic weapon, but you need to protect him. You need help up front. Apparently they're kind of taking we get a couple second and third round tackle or guard and help improve the worst player on the O-line. The baseline of the offensive line improves, and hopefully that's enough. But I really don't want Joe Burrow just to flame out due to injury, and I doubt the Bengals and Bengals fans would want that either. And you have to protect him for that to be the case.
They couldn't protect him. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't do anything with that offensive line, and that's after making some additions last year, and they're still just not there. I mean, I'm pretty surprised by this too. This seems like a strange luxury pick, for these guys. Is Miami in the tackle market?
I think Penny Sewell at this point is probably the best player on the board that's not a quarterback. Same thing we have.
Has to be, right?
Right. And if you're, I say it all the time, and I think people just think that I like offensive linemen or something like that and have a thing for offensive linemen.
You do, kind of.
I do kind of.
A little.
Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. But offensive line, protecting the quarterback is just as important, if not more important. And statistically, it bears this out too, right? If you look at some of the studies that places like Pro Football Focus and some of these analytics houses have done, they have saw that quarterbacks that get protected, they last longer, they play better than quarterbacks that you try to stack their weapons around them. And like Brad said, they have Tyler Boyd, they have T. Higgins in Cincinnati. This isn't an awful supporting cast.
How many don't have a stout offensive line or one that's playing at the top of its game?
The ones recently, I know Josh Schwartz put the list out there of like the last 4 or 5 Super Bowl champions. It's Philadelphia Eagles, best offensive line in football. Patriots best offensive line in 18. Kansas City, really good offensive line in 19. And then Tampa, really good offensive line last year.
Can't do it. It's just can't do it. You can't have your quarter. You saw the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes is the best player on the planet, and the game was over before it started because he didn't have a friggin' second to breathe. You can't do it without the O-lineman. You just can't. So I'm a little surprised here too.
To answer your question, the Dolphins are absolutely in the offensive tackle market. They drafted 2 last year in Austin Jackson and Robert Hunt. I would say both were up and down, and then they tried to add Isaiah Wilson.
It sounds like they're moving Hunt to guard as well, so they're definitely.
Yeah, they tried to add Isaiah Wilson a few weeks ago, and that lasted less than a week or a few days.
Right.
So they're definitely at least in the market for an offensive tackle, and I think they probably wanted Jamar Chase. If Penny Sewell was gone, but him falling into their lap, I think you have to pull the trigger right now for the Dolphins because they're in a similar situation as the Bengals because they have a quarterback entering his second year, and he did not get hurt last year, but his season before that, Alabama, he had that lower body injury, that his hip injury that he needs to continue to be protected. So,
this pick is also not a trade. They have made it. We don't know who it is just yet, but again,
it could. If the theme sticks of wide receiver over offensive line, I mean, is Jalen Waddle, Devontae or Jalen Waddle, I guess, is not completely out of the realm. But if you're the Patriots and you have to deal with Penny Sewell climb to the second level for the next 5 to 10 years, I think that's a little bit even more scary than the wide receivers for sure. But at the same time, I saw in the chat someone just said that they took Jalen Waddle. These wide receivers, I mean, look, I wish all the best to Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa. I really do. I hope that their careers work out. I hope that they can keep those 2 guys healthy. It's a deep offensive line class, and maybe they're thinking that they can get their tackles on day 2 or they can get their linemen to protect their guys on day 2. It's just crazy to me that we're talking about these wide receivers. What good is Jalen Waddle running 60 yards down the field wide open if Tua's on his back before he can even make the throw?
They're going to go Waddle. They're going to go Waddle. That's my bet.
Let these teams do it. And look, at some point, so yeah, it is Jalen Waddle.
It is.
So
it's Waddle.
It's Jalen Waddle. So also we haven't really discussed the Patriots trading up for a non-quarterback, right? Like a position player.
And I don't think that's impossible. In fact,
at what point do you pick up the phone with Penny Sewell, right? I mean,
yeah. I was on with Greg was doing a podcast, and I was helping him out with that earlier today. And that's one of the things, and he wrote it at BSJ as well. do not be stunned if the Patriots trade up and don't take a quarterback. I would say New England Patriots fans' heads would fall off if they trade up and they don't take a quarterback. But it's possible, right? Because look at where you do have those needs, and again, going back to the thing I said before, the chance to take a best player at his position and one that could be instantly one of the best in the game, you're absolutely right. If Sewell's sitting there at 10 and you think you could get up there without a huge cost, of course you would do that, right?
I think so. And we've talked about tackle as a need for the Patriots for a while now in terms of the 2022 season. But at the same time, and I threw this out there as sort of like something that could surprise people, if you draft a guy like Penny Sewell in the first round, I think the Patriots would start shopping Isaiah Wynn tomorrow and see if teams would take Isaiah Wynn for a third-round pick, because you can start Sewell obviously week 1 right away in September and be really good and have a really good offensive line, probably a better offensive line than you have now. So if you're the Patriots, we've talked about the 2022 need of having to put in a tackle, right? Having to get that Trent Brown, having to get an Isaiah Wynn replacement at left tackle. And getting a guy like Penny Sewell at this point would just be an absolute steal.
Brad, you still got us?
I would say.
I am. I'm here.
Yep,
and I don't know. I think you're right that Patriots fans would go crazy. If they traded up and it wasn't for a quarterback. But at the same time, I mean, you can get Sewell. You can then flip Isaiah Wynn maybe for a third-round pick or maybe even a higher pick than that if teams get desperate for tackle help, as it sometimes happens to be. And then all of a sudden you have a couple of more assets on day 2. It's not a terrible path to take, and you'd get a maybe first rookie all-pro offensive lineman in Sewell.
One of my favorite things, and the Patriots probably aren't the only draft base where this happens, but one of my favorite things, just covering the team for as long as as long as we have, and is and everybody constantly being frustrated by whatever it is Bill Belichick does in drafts, is how pre-mad everybody is. The Patriots haven't made a pick yet. You have no idea what they're going to do, and everybody's already rip-roaring mad over what they think might happen. So again, it's starting to get interesting. We're in that 7, 8, 9 spot here. So it's getting interesting. Brad, go ahead.
I would just love to listen to Boston Sports Radio tomorrow morning if they do trade up with Justin Fields available and
don't take him.
Oh my God!
They don't even.
I think it's possible.
The frustration for me is that they don't even really know who Penny Sewell is, right? So like they're just going to start screaming and banging on tables and stuff like that, and they don't realize that they just got a guy that could be an All-Pro as a rookie. Like he's really that good. Like
I go all the way back to the early Richard Seymour is the classic one where they had a pick and it was high and every single human being wanted David Terrell.
Right.
And people lost their freaking minds, when they took Seymour. And
I can't believe Brian Flores signed off on this Jalen Waddle pick. Like the only thing I can think of is that he thinks to himself, look, if I had to prepare every single week for Jalen Waddle as a defensive coordinator and as a head coach, that would really stink. So obviously, maybe like you can.
I don't get this pick either.
But if you're Brian Flores and you're just looking at it, like Bill is like thinking to himself right now, like I taught you better than that, B-Flow. Like what are you doing, taking the wide receiver over the ready-made tackle? But at this point in the draft, number 7, Detroit Lions, the pick is in. So it sounds like they've made a pick. We're getting to the point where these quarterbacks are really starting to fall, and maybe the Patriots don't have to move at all.
I said, my bold prediction again is it's going to be there when it's their turn to pick, and they're still going to pass. And that's another scenario where I think people's heads will explode.
This has to be a lineman. The Lions.
So do you think? I mean, it's got to be Sewell if it's a lineman. I mean, maybe I guess they could take Rashawn Slater, but I don't know why you would take Slater over Sewell.
Could be, yeah.
Just real quickly, I am hurt right now because every year I get the jersey of the player I had as the number 1 receiver in the draft, and now I have to buy a Miami Dolphins jersey and hang it on my wall.
Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Brad was the leader of the DK Metcalf bandwagon a couple of years ago, and he nailed it. He nailed that.
Brad, where did you have Harry? I'll ask you there in that class.
Had him at wide receiver 5. Debo Samuel
behind Debo, yeah.
AJ Brown and Kelvin Harmon on top, and DK number 1.
And DK. Gotcha.
I remember we did a podcast, Brad, way back when they took N'Keal Harry, and we talked about N'Keal, and I was like, I'm not so sold on this guy, and you were like, me neither. And then a month later, they drafted him, and I was like, oh no, all right, well, I'll see what the Detroit Lions. I mean, I'm shocked that
they are taking Sewell. It looks like.
I'm really shocked that none of these teams
They're
are starting to call these teams about the quarterbacks. Like
they're taking Sewell.
This is the pick. I think the Panthers at 8.
They got him. Yep. So here we go.
The Panthers at 8 after acquiring Sam Darnold. This is the pick that if a team's going to trade up, I think it happens right now. I don't think Denver wants to trade out. I don't think Dallas wants to trade out. I think right now the Panthers at pick 8 is the pick it's going to happen if it's going to happen.
If a trade up happens, you think?
Right.
That was what I had heard a few days ago when I wrote my pre-draft kind of preview with the mailbag. I said the pick that I had really heard that if the Patriots were going to do it would be the 8th pick with the Carolina Panthers. They sort of felt like at 9, the source I was talking to sort of felt like at 9, if a quarterback had fallen in Denver's lap, then the Broncos weren't going to pass on it. So the Patriots really needed to get to 8 to leapfrog Denver to make sure that they got their pick of Mac Jones or Justin Fields. That was sort of the scenario that was presented to me. I don't know which quarterback is the one that the Patriots really like, but they have liked Justin Fields and Mac Jones, I think, above the rest has sort of been their 2 guys. But now as we see all how this is all shaking out, you kind of feel like maybe they can just stay for a little while and maybe they don't have to trade all the way up to 8. But at some point, the New Orleans Saints have been trying all day long to get into the top 10. A lot of people had said it's not for a quarterback. Some people had said it was for a quarterback. So New Orleans is kind of keep playing it close to the vest, exactly what they're looking to do with that pick. But they're the team that everybody has been talking about all day, are aggressively trying to trade up into the top 10 to get somebody, whether it's a corner or a quarterback. Those are kind of the 2 positions that they've sort of narrowed it down to.
Right.
So now if you're the Patriots at 8, I think that you do, if you really want your guy and you just want to confirm that you're getting your guy, and now is the pick that you need to call in and start to make this trade happen.
Well, what does it take? What do you have to do here? What's the book say?
So honestly, I thought
is this a first and a third?
I thought it would be a first and a third, but the league does not seem too super high on Justin Fields and Mac Jones right now, right? So I don't know if it's going to be as much as maybe we thought it was going to be a month ago. And maybe the Patriots can get it for 15, 46 in the 4th round pick, or maybe they don't even need to include 46. I don't know.
Let me ask you now, okay, we are 8, 9, 10, 11, so we're 7, whatever. We're in the 8th pick right now. So how many players are left right now that you're thrilled if the Patriots get? Regardless of where they're picking, how many guys left on the board that you're like, but Brad, start with you, that you're like, oh, they get one of these blank number of guys, then great.
Fields, Slater, Smith, Parsons, Horn, Surtain. Tell me if I'm missing anyone. Quay,
Fields.
Yeah, Fields is the first one. So at least 7.
At least 7. So right now, you think they stand pat? They have a stud.
I think they have a guy that they would really like. Yeah. I mean, I think it gets a little bit tricky when you start to talk about, is Mac Jones in that group? Now, for me and Brad, Mac Jones isn't in that group, but we heard all along that the NFL loves Mac Jones. Now we're sitting here at pick number 8 and Mac Jones is still on the board. So they obviously didn't love him as much as some of people have made it out to seem, right? And kudos to the San Francisco 49ers, because my guess is Trey Lance might have been their guy all along, and they kind of got everybody to believe it was Mac Jones there for a while. That's the smoke screens of this time of year, right?
Yep.
Is that everybody sort of has their guy from the get-go, and we sort of get fooled into thinking it's somebody else. I don't know. At this point, though, like Brad and I have been saying, 8. This is when the draft starts for the teams that are picking outside the top 10 to come up and get that quarterback. And if you're the Patriots, I think you can stay put at 15 and get a player you really like. Brad, the one other guy I would mention is Christian Darrisaw. I think if they get Darrisaw at 15, that's a really good pick as well. A ready-made left tackle that can fill in right away. I think that's a solid pick too at 15. Parsons, Horn, Surtain, the 2 quarterbacks. I mean, that's 5 guys right there. Devontae Smith is 6. So, yeah, I mean, technically they could stay at 15 and probably roll the dice here and still come away with a really good player.
Just to think about what it would take to move up to pick 8. I know you mentioned potentially pick 46 and another mid round, something like that. I think pick 96 in this year's draft holds a little bit more value than a number 4, the fourth round pick. It's the first compensatory selection of the third round, and then maybe pick 46 this year or a future second, something along those lines. I think might be enough. Maybe you have to add in some late round picks or a sweetener or something like that. But ultimately, I think a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3 could be enough to move those 7 spots, which I think I would be open to if it means Justin Fields.
Yeah. So earlier today, Rappaport tweeted that teams are really coveting those 2022 draft picks because this year is so uncertain.
Because you have tape, you see players, right?
There's a lack of tape. There's a lack of medicals.
In-person workout.
There's no combine. There's no in-person workouts. So this draft, more than any other draft maybe in the history of the league, is sort of a crapshoot, even more so than it already is. So teams are really hanging on to those 2022 picks, which means that it's going to be really difficult for a team like Carolina or a team like Denver or Dallas that might be interested in going back a little bit to get a team like the Patriots to include a 2022 pick in there. Yeah. So who knows? I mean, I think that you can get into a situation now where you might only have to give up picks
but why play this game? This is the thing now. Like, if you're a Patriots fan or you're the Patriots right now and you love a quarterback, love them.
Yeah.
There is no cost too high. There isn't. There's no price too high.
I agree
because it doesn't matter at this point. What is Tom Brady worth in actual value? 10 first round draft picks? It doesn't matter. Not that you're getting Tom Brady, but if you're getting a guy who's going to be your quarterback or you think could be your quarterback and play at a high level for 10 years, there is no price that's too high. So right now, if you're doing that little dance with what can I get away with and can I, will they just take this, or I'm drawing a hard line in the sand, and you let a player slip who you really, really like and you think is a potential franchise quarterback, I think that's a miss. So I don't think you can do, the only thing I'd feel good about is if honestly they don't have first round grades on either of these guys, nor do they think that they're worth taking, and they're absolutely perfectly happy with taking a guy in the second round because they think they're the same player. And if that's the case, that's their evaluation. But if they love one of these guys, you have to make a move right now. You can't let it slip by you.
You can convince me that Mac Jones is in the same tier as a guy like a Kyle Trask. You cannot convince me that Justin Fields is in the same tier.
Whether you believe it, it's more a matter if they believe one of those two or both are potential franchise quarterbacks. At this point, in the situation that they're in, you can't play around. You have to go.
Well, so
I think
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying one thing to consider when comparing, the value of this year's picks to potentially next year's picks, is I think the Patriots are going to be lower in the draft order. I think their team improved, and is pick 15 in this year worth the same as pick 25 next year? You know what I mean? Where does that value and the change that next year's class is going to be a little bit easier to grade? How does that exactly compute? Something to keep in mind, because maybe they'll have to give up pick 46. They give up the second round pick next year and ends up as pick 58. But really, Carolina might have preferred that, or whoever they end up. If
Carolina makes the pick. Yep.
So they took it down to the wire, though. There was like 30 seconds left on the clock when the pick is in, came across the screen. So they definitely had calls for this pick. It's going to be interesting to see if the Patriots were one of those calls, because they certainly were taking it down to the mat to make sure that they crossed all their T's and dot all their I's. So we'll see. It's going to be really interesting to see if the Patriots were one of those teams that were trying to pry this pick from Carolina.
I believe my prediction would be Rashawn Slater for this pick for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, that'd be my prediction as well. It sounds like it's not Justin Fields. That I can say that from Benjamin Albright on Twitter, but he didn't tweet who the pick actually is. He just said it's not Justin Fields. So maybe it is Rashawn Slater. I doubt it would be Mac Jones. I mean, that doesn't really seem to make much sense for them with Sam Darnold on the team. Could be a corner, could be Sertan or JC Horn coming off the board here. But, look, Denver at 9, they're the team that I had said at the beginning, if a quarterback fell into their laps, then they were thinking about taking QB. They weren't going to trade up.
It's JC Horn.
So they took a corner, and Sertan's the second corner off the board now. So that's really interesting as well.
JC Horn.
Alpha dog. That guy's physical. He's mean. He's a great press man corner, extremely good on the outside. good ball skills. Game against Auburn was just tour de force of cornerback tape. I mean, that's as good as it gets in terms of round one prospects at the cornerback position. I think he had 3 picks, maybe a couple more pass breakups in that game. I mean, that was like an absolute clinic. But I am surprised to see, I don't know about you, Brad, I am surprised that Horn goes ahead of Surtain.
Yeah, I mean, they were probably like 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
But I'm more surprised that the Panthers pass on an offensive lineman. If they're going to roll with Sam Darnold, if that was the choice, clearly they're not taking a quarterback. They decide we're going to take a positional player. Don't you want to protect the guy who has been unprotected for 3 years in New York? Greg Little and Taylor Moton are your starting tackles. Dennis Daly's one of the starting guards, and he's a converted tackle, and he was pretty bad this past year. I'm just shocked that they're not doing a better job. They have the weapons, but you got to also protect that quarterback that you just spent draft capital to acquire.
So I wonder, just looking at Cincinnati, looking at Miami, looking at this pick by Carolina, we've talked a lot about the depth of the tackle class and how many good tackles there are in this class. Maybe these teams are looking at it and saying that they're going to get their tackle in the second round, right? They're fine with taking the drop off from a guy like Rashawn Slater to Alex Leatherwood or to Taven Jenkins or to whoever, Liam Eichenberg, go right on down the list, Dylan Raduns. Maybe they feel like those guys are not that far off from a guy like Rashawn Slater, so they're good with doing that, and they feel like J.C. Horn is a bigger drop off from Horn to Asante Samuel Jr. or one of the Georgia guys at the top of the second round or something like that. So I guess I could see that. If Miami and Cincinnati and Carolina come back tomorrow and they all take tackles with their first pick in the second round, then these decisions in the first round make a whole lot more sense.
That's a great point. And on top of that, you mentioned that the Broncos could be a team that, might be able to take a quarterback. But this, I think, thinking about it, after acquiring Teddy Bridgewater, they're in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes per se. I guess that they could also be a team if they're not going to trade pick 9. We'll find out in the next 5 minutes if they're going to trade this for Aaron Rodgers. But if not, they could also be a team that could be one to trade down with. Maybe it's not the Patriots. Maybe this is the range where the Bears or Washington or New Orleans gets involved, in the 9, 10, 11, 12 range.
Yeah, so the Broncos were a team that I had heard, if a quarterback fell in their laps, they were thinking quarterback. They were going to take the guy that fell to them. I thought it was Trey Lance that really had their attention. They used the guy that they wanted. San Francisco took Trey Lance at number 3. That's why they knew that was going to happen a few days ago. They triggered the trade for Teddy Bridgewater. So I guess now we're going to figure out if they really
got to take Fields here.
Were they really in on Trey Lance, or was it Justin Fields all along that they really liked, and then they'll take Justin Fields right now? But like Brad said, you think you might be in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstake. You got Drew Lock and you got Teddy Bridgewater already on the roster. As great as Justin Fields is, I mean, you got 3 quarterbacks at this point, and you're thinking about getting the 4th. At what point do you start to have too many quarterbacks and sort of, that's a great problem to have, I guess, if you're Denver, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's a dicey proposition to take another QB here. And that definitely would tell us that some of this Aaron Rodgers stuff that's out there is pretty much just media driven narrative, but
I think it's nonsense, the stuff that was out there with it being almost a done deal. But again, you said it. It's falling in your lap is exactly what happened here. And again, if you had this guy, someone who you were talking about, you might have taken if you were sitting at 3, and you can take them right now at 9. It's hard to not do it. So
if they don't take Justin Fields here at 9, I don't know. I don't know what will come out eventually.
Are you going to be okay? If this is going to get really tense for you right now.
I just don't know what's going to come out about Justin Fields. I don't know if we're ever going to find out why the NFL soured on Justin Fields. This is a quarterback, Brad, you said it earlier, that was the number 1 quarterback in the country. And if he wasn't number 1, he was number 2 to Trevor Lawrence since like the 8th grade. You know what I mean? Like, this is a guy that's been the quarterback to have at this age group since high school, since he was 14 years old. And nothing changed on the tape at Ohio State. He was great at Ohio State, and nothing changed at all. And there's got to be something going on behind the scenes. And I hate to get into this type of crap because you just don't know, right? And it's a lot of hearsay, and it's a lot of stuff that you want to be careful with what you say. And there are just these conversations like Dan Orlovsky put out there about Justin Fields. And I just don't know how relevant any of that is, how real any of that is. But the league is clearly buying into some of it because we've had 3 quarterbacks go off the board already. None of them were Justin Fields. And now Denver, we'll see what they do. If they don't take Justin Fields, then something is up with the NFL and Justin Fields. Like, he's interviewed terribly. He isn't putting in the work in the offseason that teams want to see, which isn't Quincy Avery and those guys are all vouching for him and saying that he's doing everything he's got to be doing. So I just don't get it. I don't know what they're missing or what we're missing, I should say, as to why Justin Fields is about to potentially fall out of the top 10 of the draft when he's clearly QB2, just in terms of what you're watching.
Right. I think you made a couple of good points there in the sense that some of these teams that have passed on me, you understand it, Cincinnati,
Right.
Miami, but it gets to the point where it's the Panthers who could be in the quarterback market and then the Broncos who should be in the quarterback market. And if consecutively both of those teams pass on Fields, now it becomes something is up with the NFL's evaluation of this player. It's one thing, Trey Lance, you bet on the ceiling, Zach Wilson, whatever. But when you quarterback needy teams start to pass on him, then it becomes something questionable. And with that said, Dallas at pick 10 isn't a team that's going to be in the quarterback market. You don't think the Giants are either, unlikely the Eagles, the Chargers, maybe the Vikings, but probably not. If he does slip past this pick 9, he is there is a potential for him to free fall to pick 15, assuming no team jumps the Patriots in the draft order.
Right. That's the biggest thing. And I just got to pull up the back end here, the draft order.
Yeah.
New Orleans is a team, again, I said, okay, they're a team that's trying to trade up. They're at 28. Pittsburgh's at 24. They're another team that I think could trade up for a quarterback with Dallas at 10 if it gets to that point. It looks like Denver is going to probably make this pick. So once you get to 24, 28, those are some teams, maybe 20, Chicago, 19, the Washington football team. Those are the teams that could now feasibly trade up to 10.
They made the pick.
So they made the pick, and those teams that I just mentioned that are picking basically in the 20s, football teams at 19, those teams can trade up now to number 10 and take a QB easily. That's what the Chiefs did for Patrick Mahomes. It's what the Texans did for Deshaun Watson. These trades happen all the time from 28 to 10. All the time.
They can. So you're still sitting pretty if you're the Patriots, though, because if you're a team here that has a first round grade on just a few players left, and you're picking at 9 or 10, you don't want to fall too far because that value falls there. If you've got 16, 17 players on your board and you fall to 20, and then in your mind 20 to 40 is the same guy, you missed an opportunity at a stud sort of player. So I still think the Patriots are in very good position here if they want to make that. If they want to make that move.
It's sounding like this is going to be Patrick Surtain to Denver at 9. So the 2 corners are now off the board. So
Dallas is going to trade out.
Justin Fields and Mac Jones make it out of the top 10. I mean, I didn't think both of these guys were going to make it this far. I thought there was a chance. I said it, my bold prediction was that Mac Jones to the Patriots happens. I thought there was a chance Mac Jones would fall this far. I really did not think that Justin Fields.
So again, you got it's unbelievable. If five in front of you, 5 picks in front of you, and there's 2 quarterbacks.
This is why you don't make the trade before the draft, right?
I realize that this might not be the best use of assets, but wouldn't Dallas be a lot of fun if they took Devontae Smith right now to add to CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup?
That's such a Jerry Jones move, isn't it? Like, to just take another wide receiver. I mean, I got getting CeeDee Lamb last year was so far and away the best player available on the board when they were on the clock that you just had to do it, right? But I don't know. I guess, that's one way to make Dak happy, right? You just gave him that huge contract, and here's Devontae Smith. Here's a Heisman Trophy winner.
So I think it'll either be a trade out or Rashawn Slater because they could use the offensive line depth.
They could. And now they don't have the 2 corners. Dallas really thought that they were going to get one of the 2 corners at 10. I don't think they envisioned this scenario happening as well. So,
they're going to take Devonta Smith, right?
That'd be the Jerry move, right?
That's the Jerry move.
Yeah.
That would be. Michael Gallup could be a trade piece. I've seen, the potential for a Gallup for Gilmore trade floated out there, which kind of would make sense for both sides, to be honest. Maybe before the Patriots and
you and Alex talked about that, I think. Yeah.
So we talked about Gallup. We also talked about using Gilmore, obviously, in the trade up. Dallas could obviously
Gilmore to 10 and get Gallup back, right?
Right.
Swap picks.
I don't think you're going to get 10 straight up for Gilmore, obviously, but if you trade Gilmore and maybe you trade, one of your day 2 picks, and you could feasibly keep 15 and get 10. Now, I don't think that they're going to do that. I don't think that's really something that's even been entertained by the Patriots at this point. But, I mean, look, anything's on the table now that these 2 quarterbacks have slid this far. You don't really have to worry about Dallas taking a quarterback, obviously. The Chargers aren't going to take a quarterback. Philadelphia, I guess, could technically take a QB here. Minnesota, maybe, I guess if Justin Fields is on the board still at 14. He's clearly the best player available. So it'd be hard to kind of say that they won't do it. Philadelphia is the interesting team at 12 too. How much do they believe in Jalen Hurts? Where are they thinking with the quarterback position as well?
If the Cowboys do make the selection, I believe it would be Rashawn Slater, considering who's available. Probably likely meaning the Giants are going to stay pat and take Devontae Smith to give Daniel Jones another weapon. And that gets us to Philadelphia with Justin Fields and Mac Jones still available, and only 3 picks before the Patriots, with one of them being the LA Chargers,
who are obviously not going to do anything. Right.
So we are getting to the point now, as long as Dallas stays and makes this selection, that one of them will be available. Likely will be available for the Patriots at 15.
And it's starting to look like if the Patriots do make a trade, it's going to be up like a slot.
That's what Bill Belichick talked about.
And he does that. Just jump in front of the team that may be trying to leapfrog you. That's it.
Maybe
just
it's Philadelphia. At 12, they could be thinking Justin Fields is an upgrade certainly over Jalen Hurts. So you take that 10 times out of 10. Excuse me. Now, when we spoke to Bill Belichick, what was that, a month ago or something like that, for his pre-draft press conference a couple weeks ago, he said he said at the end of the answer that he was spitballing and he was just throwing things against the wall just to kind of give us an example. But he said if a guy that we thought was going to go in the top 6 or 7 picks fell into the 12, 13 range, then we would start to talk about moving up those couple of spots to make that happen. And that's the exact situation that we are talking about right now.
If
you kind of wonder if you let it slip a little bit there, right? You kind of wonder that if maybe he just came out of the war room a couple minutes ago, and then he comes in to do the Zoom call with the reporters, and it's on his mind that that's a scenario that might play out, and that's sort of what they've been talking about. And we, he kind of is able to get us off the scent a little bit by saying, hey, I'm just throwing out numbers up against the wall, but Adam Schefter just tweeted that Dallas is trying to trade this pick, which makes all the sense in the world.
Oh my God.
And if you're trying to trade this pick, then it's got to be to the Patriots, right? Or a team that's behind the Patriots.
Oh boy.
So, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely it's definitely getting real.
I will say this: if it's not the Patriots, you would assume that Dallas gives New England the chance to match or exceed the trade, considering they are higher in the draft.
It's Philadelphia. So my guess is that Philadelphia is coming up for Justin Fields. That's got to be it.
That's
right?
happened. It is Philadelphia.
Ian Rappaport just tweeted that Philadelphia has traded with Dallas. So I got to think that Philadelphia just saw Justin Fields sitting there and was like, "We got it. We got to do it." Right?
Is it Slater?
If they traded up for a tackle, they must really believe in Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, I don't know how you feel about Jalen Hurts, Brad, but I think Justin Fields is on a different level.
I completely agree. I was just going based on the assumption that the Eagles and their owner was pretty adamant that just Jalen Hurts should get a fair shake as a starting quarterback.
That's what it sounded like. So again, I'm confused here. Unless they're all in on who else would they be all in on here? Smith?
Devontae Smith, Rashawn Slater,
it's possible, right?
Devontae
Smith makes sense here for somebody where they say, "Wow, this is the last guy I had to have," and he's right there. And that would make sense.
And the Giants were going to take him at 11.
And the Giants are taking him at 11. That would make sense. That leapfrog. And I do think that Hurts thing is they kind of said, "I want to see us give this guy a shot." So it would surprise me. If I had to guess, I would go Smith here, but I don't know.
So it took a 3rd round pick to move up 2 spots. So the Patriots would have moved up 5 spots. So you're thinking maybe you had to throw in another 4th round pick or something like that to make it happen.
Easily.
So to me, if the Patriots wanted to do it at this point, it would have been done. this is a signal to me that they feel like their guy is probably going to be there at 15, whether it's a quarterback or not a quarterback. If they wanted to make this trade happen, Dallas was auctioning this pick off. All it was a third-round pick from Philadelphia. They easily could have outbid that if they really wanted to. So obviously the Patriots did not want to move with Dallas up to 10. So they must feel like either they're comfortable with coming away with either Justin Fields or Mac Jones, and they just don't really care which one falls to them, or they're not in on a quarterback at all. Who knows?
Yeah, they might have decided they're trading back already for all we know, and everybody's freaking out here trying to figure out if they're going to move, They
gave up 12 and 84 for 10. Easily could have been done by the Patriots. That's a trade that they had a bunch of fourth-round picks, so you can throw 15, 96 and 120 and trade it, same trade. Right, same value as what Philadelphia just gave up to Dallas. So I kind of like the Devontae Smith angle for Philadelphia as well here, and it makes a lot of sense that they would jump the Giants to make sure that they got the player.
Yeah.
I believe the Giants likely become an option to trade as well if Devontae Smith is unavailable.
If that was their guy, yeah. I mean,
right.
maybe they kind of go to Rashad Bateman now or Elijah Moore, whoever they have next on that kind of wide receiver pecking order. I don't know if they'd like Kadarius Toney that much. I guess it depends on his off-field stuff. But those are the guys that they could maybe trade down and still feel comfortable with taking them at wide receiver. I still think the Giants could go with somebody like a Micah Parsons too, though. Just that defense got a little bit better last year, but they still need to take that next step defensively, I think. And they could go with somebody like a Parsons as well. But I mean, man, this is getting real. John's bold prediction of the Patriots being on the clock at 15 and passing on a quarterback is really starting to become making me sweat a little bit over here.
I don't know.
My knees are bouncing officially. It's to the point where it's getting so close.
You look really calm from here to here, though. You're good. Your duck's underwater, right? You're keeping it together. You're composed on screen for sure. Picks in, obviously, so we'll see. And
they took it down to the wire, even though they traded up to get this pick, which is a little bit bizarre. But
yeah, let's.
The new head coach is always interesting too, because you think when you bring in a new coach, they might want a different quarterback, because the previous one wasn't a scheme fit or whatever the case may be. And Hurts kind of fits that mold. Is Nick Sirianni going to run the Colts system?
It is Devontae Smith. Devontae. So, look, this is you get the Heisman Trophy winner at number 10. You take that all day, right?
Sure, you leapfrog a division rival to do it.
Who a lot of people thought were going in that direction. So yeah, that's a good move for Philly there.
I think Dallas, when Horn and Surtain were taken at 8 and 9, decided we're going to trade out, and the Eagles, seeing Devontae Smith could be available at 11, decided then that they were going to make that move. But I don't know. I don't think Dallas does that if one of the corners were still available at pick 10.
Right. Yeah, I think Dallas was probably surprised, honestly, that the two corners went ahead of them. That's a little shocking to me. I think that they had to think that they were going to be able to come away with J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain. The fact that they couldn't get either one of those guys tonight, I think is a shock to them.
Well, are the Giants a trade partner here for the Patriots potentially?
I think so. I think
you got the Patriots
Giants the Giants not having Kyle Pitts or any of the top 3 receivers still available and they've invested into the offensive line over the last 2 offseasons.
Exactly.
Make them a potential team.
The value here is what? Tackle or a quarterback? It would be the picks here in this slot where there's value. And if you don't need those things, you might be able to slide back in. Sure, there's a couple linebackers out there as well that they could be interested in. But you might be able to slide back and still get value here. Yeah, you probably get your guy at 15 and just gain assets here if you're the Giants. So this could be this is an interesting spot for me if I'm for the Patriots. I think.
So number 11 is also, number 11 Rappaport for sale as well on the auction block. So you can move up to number 11 right now. I think we nailed it. I think that the Eagles and Giants were both vying for Devontae Smith. So the Eagles jumped New York and get Devontae Smith. I think it's funny. Like I know in Dallas that the Giants are kind of the more hated team in a way than Philadelphia in terms of division rivals. So maybe they didn't want to give Devontae Smith to the Giants. So
who wronged who in the playoffs here, right?
The Giants.
It was the other way around. No, it was Philly. Philly wronged the Giants. Yeah.
Yeah, the Giants.
By sitting everybody, I was trying to. I couldn't remember.
Powerhouses of that division for the most part, right?
Yeah.
The teams that come out of there with the most Super Bowl championships and stuff like that. So
when you look at it from the Cowboys' perspective, to be honest, whether it's a hate thing or not, I think the Giants are just a better team than Philadelphia right now. And you kind of spread the wealth out a little bit by getting Devontae Smith to Philly instead of New York. I think looking into next year, the Giants are just better. So might as well, not give them a chance to get even better and probably win the division if they add Devontae Smith.
This is getting crazy right now that these two quarterbacks are dangling out there, just desperate for a team to get a little bit aggressive if you're the Patriots. I mean, I really think that Chicago just traded up to 11, so that the Bears are taking one of the QBs. That's obviously a lock. So the question is which one is got the Bears' attention? It's gotta. I still gotta think it's Justin Fields, right? That goes here to Chicago, which still leaves Mac Jones for the Patriots, who, like I said, some late buzz about the Patriots and Mac Jones, that was sort of the guy that they were trying to cover up they liked all along.
I mean, look at it this way: all of the Patriots interested in Field stuff was ridiculous, because that doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. All of a sudden, the buzz that they were, I'm hearing they really like him. They may move up to make him. I mean, to take him, that smells funny when it comes out of anything, that the Patriots are doing, because that's just not how they do business. How many times in history of the Patriots have you gotten word of somebody they're interested in the draft and had them actually take that person?
So it doesn't. There's two guys that I can remember. One of them was Chandler Jones. The Patriots, there's a lot of rumors out there about the Patriots liking Chandler Jones in that draft. The other one was actually Juwan Williams. I remember a few days before, I think it was Peter Schrager had them taking Juwan Williams in the first round in his final mock, and that sort of came out of nowhere. I remember I added him late to my big board because there was just too much buzz about them liking Juwan to not have him on there. And that was really the only two ones that I could think of. So that's what, look, Jeff Howe, I obviously trust a lot what he says about the Patriots. And he was saying the Patriots had entertained, the idea of trading up. They wanted a quarterback. He had heard that they liked Justin Fields, not necessarily their preference. And that was basically aligned up with everything that I had heard, that Justin Fields was somebody that had caught their eye, that they were thinking about trading up. But now I think that we're in a situation where they probably felt like they just didn't have to.
So right or wrong, and again, this is fine if Jones is their guy and that's who they get. But this is the spot where you're going to have all of the armchair drafters starting to freak out a little bit, because, if Fields is and could be, or what, now you could have had him, okay? You couldn't have had you could have had him, and easily. And so now you're going to be tracking Justin Fields' career for the rest of his life, wondering whether or not you should have just done whatever it took to get up a few picks and make that pick. Right or wrong, that's just how it works, because it's available. They're going to be living down Lamar Jackson. That's always going to be the case. When you had a shot at a player and you choose not to take the player, you've got to live with the consequences here. So you're hoping they're right.
I'm about to read what they gave up, and it's just going to make Patriots fans scream internally. They gave up the 20th pick in the draft, a 1 next year, a 5, and a 4. That was the package for the deal to move up from 20 to 11. So the Patriots, like you just said, John, if they wanted the quarterback that the Bears are about to take right here, I got to think it's Justin Fields. Could have gotten it done easily. Could have easily made this happen. And like you said, we're going to live in a world, especially if the Patriots don't take a quarterback at all, but even if they take Mac Jones in a couple of picks, where it's going to be Mac Jones versus Justin Fields, did Bill Belichick make the right call for the next 5 to 10 years, right? And if it turns out that they made the wrong call, then it's gonna be one that's going to haunt them for sure.
Well, you're saying they made they gave a first up next year?
They did give up a first next year, yes.
I mean, that's fairly significant.
It is.
Not saying your Patriots couldn't have done that, but that's fairly significant.
It is, obviously they move up 9 spots versus moving up 5 spots. So it is Justin Fields to Chicago.
Fields. Yep.
So
Womp womp. Yeah.
It just this is going to be one of, like Lamar, like all these, like you said, like this is going to be one of those things that we're going to talk about for a long time. We're going to talk about whether or not the Patriots screwed themselves here or not, to put it frankly.
Well, I mean, Brad, go. You had this guy super high here. How disappointed are you?
Very. Yeah, I mean, I gladly would have, if I was the Patriots, given up next year's first and a fourth and a fifth. And that would have had to be less. It probably would have only been next year's first.
It probably could have gone and done for 96, for 46. 15, 46 probably moves them up that spot.
And I think Justin Fields, yeah, like I said, guys, I think this guy's one of the – and in a given year, he could be the number one quarterback in the draft and the number one overall pick as far as his talent goes and the film he showed. In the Kyler Murray draft, I think he would have been the number one pick. In the Baker Mayfield draft, I think he would have been the number one pick. Just a guy who's a strong athlete, can play from the pocket, underrated ability to go through his reads, can make all the throws. I think his his internal clock could use work, but as Evan has said in the past, it was more of a vertical based offense anyway at Ohio State. And just productive, took care of the football, played hurt. His 2 best games of his career were Michigan in 2019 and Clemson in 2020, and he played those games with injuries. So I just don't think that, I think that he was an unbelievable prospect, and if the Patriots could have given up 46 to go get him, I think they should have.
I think they should have too. Like I said, I had heard earlier today that the winds had sort of shifted, right? They built this smoke screen around Justin Fields being their guy. You get into draft day and Mac Jones's name starts to come up with people. And you kind of wonder, with the Saban connection, with all this Justin Fields talk, maybe the Patriots felt like Mac Jones was their guy all along and they could get him at 15 without moving. And they felt like that was the fact that they could get him at 15 and they had liked the player and they knew a lot about him in a year where you don't know a lot about some of these guys. I don't know. But at the same time, Urban Meyer has the connection back to Ohio State with Ryan Day. I'm sure that they could have gotten a lot of information on Justin Fields as well. And they just didn't like the player. It just seemed like that was a smokescreen that they created and they didn't like the player. And it is puzzling to me that they would view it that way, but that's sort of how it feels right now.
Here's the other possibility. They took a shot, but they weren't willing to give up a first next year. For all you know, they're on the phone there as well. So it's hard to guess whether or not they didn't like Fields. But I do agree. I mean, you feel like they had more leverage because they're in a better position here, just picking a few spots later, where that the Giants pick wouldn't have been hugely different. So it seems like a miss. And again, it's, what do we know? I mean, they're the experts here, but just player aside, your evaluations aside, tape aside, at some point or another, just have to have that playmaking quarterback as well. I don't know what you got. Jones may be the next incarnation of Tom Brady. Maybe. I don't know, but there's something to be said about that. The way the quarterback position has evolved now over time. Mac Jones just doesn't fit that mold. So he has to be near perfect to be worth taking here and saying this guy's going to be my franchise quarterback. And that's asking a lot of a person to be who's going to sit there, see the receiver, hit the receiver, but that's all he can do. That's what he does. He's got to be almost near perfect to justify the pick, if in fact that is where they go here. So I'll just ask you guys, at 15, if he's sitting there, do you want the Patriots to go get Mac Jones now?
I do. I do want the Patriots to get Mac Jones because as much as I don't like the value of Mac Jones at 15, I think that getting Mac Jones at 15 is a better bet for the Patriots than waiting on Kellen Mond or Kyle Trask or Davis Mills or one of these quarterbacks on day 2. I still think that he is a better prospect than those players, and it's enough better that I would take the chance at 15. But what you said, John, is into the kind of the bottom line with Mac Jones to me is that if you are expecting him to improve at the NFL level to the point where it was a player that can really elevate the scheme, that can play make, that can be somebody that does more than just what his weapons allow him to do. You are expecting him to master the craft like Tom Brady did, like Drew Brees did, like Peyton Manning did. And you are expecting him to be just so fast through his reads, so quick with the decision making, so accurate with the football that the athletic stuff and the arm talent stuff, none of that matters because he is just this cerebral machine from the pocket. That's what you are expecting. You are expecting him to develop in a similar way to those
boom,
guys.
boom, boom, boom through the progressions, lightning fast, Brady-like, and being able to just get the ball wherever it needs to go. That you're almost counting on that with a player like him.
And that's it. It's not possible he's going to turn into Tom Brady, right? But is it possible that he can do the things that the Patriots want their quarterbacks to do? Absolutely. I mean, he can be that sort of guy that can stand in the pocket, get quickly through a progression, understand leverage, understand how to throw off leverage with option routes and things like that in the middle of the field, and be able to be that quick game, quick processing passer. And the one thing that you continuously heard from Steve Sarkisian and all the interviews that he did on Mac Jones, whether it was back in the college football season, during the college football playoff, or after that, was that he's got quick eyes. That's how Sarkisian would always say it, right? He's got quick eyes. He sees things happen quickly. He sees defensive structures change quickly. And that is an attractive quality for certain people. And the other thing that you hear is that Bill O'Brien went down to Alabama to be the offensive coordinator of the Crimson Tide this year. And Mac Jones was the one that was teaching him the offense. They put Mac Jones and Bill O'Brien in a room and said, Mac's going to teach you the playbook. And he was able to do it. And that sort of thought process, that sort of quarterback that works like that thinks like that. That's why everybody thought that 49ers loved Mac Jones. That's why they all thought that he was going to be Kyle Shanahan's guy. So there are things to like about Mac Jones. The ceiling is capped. The physical talent is not what Justin Fields brings to the table. I was QB2 Justin Fields all day long. I thought that he was the better prospect. But at the same time, I think that you can sell yourself on Mac Jones a lot better than you can sell yourself on Kyle Trask or Davis Mills. Those guys are home run swings, right? Those guys you're trying to hit the ball 500 feet, whereas Mac Jones is somebody that is definitely a player that I think can get there a lot easier. There's a lot easier path to that player being a good quarterback for you.
Now, I would be against the pick, Mac Jones at pick 15. I would rather go with a positional player and improve the roster for next season.
Or trade down.
When I see Mac Jones, I see a player who, I don't want to say was a system quarterback, but he threw more play action and RPOs than any other quarterback in this draft class.
Yeah,
that's a fact. And on top of that, it wasn't
behind the line of scrimmage too.
Yes, and it wasn't only that, but when you play action and RPO with Najee Harris, the linebackers are going to attack the line of scrimmage, and you're creating bigger passing windows for your already elite wide receivers. And something about him, some of the things that Evan said are true. The quick eyes, his ability to work from one read to the next very quickly. However, right, he doesn't have the physical tools that Tom Brady in his prime did, or Peyton Manning in his prime. So it's one thing to be able to do it mentally, but it's another thing when you can't drive the ball or generate enough velocity that those guys could when they were at their apex. I think Mac Jones' ceiling is more like Kirk Cousins, which is fine, and you're going to win games, but he's not going to put you over the top because his arm isn't what those elite quarterbacks what they're capable of doing. And not that I wouldn't be I would like to add Kirk Cousins to the Patriots. I think they'd be a really good team next year, but I don't think that you're going to win a Super Bowl with him ever, unless every single thing is perfect and he somehow goes on a Joe Flacco-esque run in the playoffs.
Oh, please don't say that.
So because
don't say Flacco,
because the Brady comparisons and because the Manning and Breeze comparisons are just totally unfair to any quarterback. The guy that I thought is sort of like the ceiling for Mac Jones is a guy like Matt Ryan, right? Who is a really good football player that a lot of people in New England kind of thinks low of because of 28-3, but he's been a great quarterback in Atlanta for 10 years. He's the guy that is mechanically sound, is sort of that technician in the pocket, has no mobility. But I think Matt Ryan certainly has a bigger arm than Mac Jones does. But that's sort of the ceiling. Kirk Cousins is sort of what you expect Mac Jones to become. As Brad said, that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. If you draft a guy at 15 and he turns out to be just Kirk Cousins or just Derek Carr, or, that sort of level of quarterback.
It's Parsons here.
So Parsons is a pick here. That doesn't surprise me. I'm not surprised that Dallas didn't care about any of the stuff that I was hearing about Micah Parsons. So, that doesn't shock me.
This is a guy you have extremely high, and Brad, I'm not sure. This is a guy you like a lot too.
Yeah, Brad and I were pretty much in agreement in the pre-draft show that Micah Parsons, I had Surtain and Parsons neck and neck the whole time for the best defensive player in the draft. I think you could go either way with it. I thought Parsons was a little bit too over-aggressive for New England's scheme. Somebody that I would worry about. In their scheme, they want guys that are just going to stack and shed and be sound and be in the right spots. And he had a little bit of Jamie Collins to his game, that he was kind of, reckless abandon, going for the splash play, that sort of thing. That was my only concern with Micah Parsons with the Patriots, but the talent is undeniable. He's a really physical freak and definitely makes Dallas's defense a whole lot better.
This is a rangy, instinctual player versus the run who can also rush the passer and can lay the boom on whoever he's hitting. Running back, tight end, wide receiver, covers ground in zones. I had Micah Parsons as the best defensive player in the draft. I think he's the best linebacker prospect since Luke Kuechly. So he's going above Roquan Smith and Devin Bush and those guys who have come since then, Devin White. I think that he was the highest graded run defender in the country as a true sophomore, you add in his athleticism, his explosiveness, ran a 4.3 40, was also had, I think, 5 or 6 sacks in that year. Just a guy who can be a 3-down player depending on how you use him. And I love the fit. I loved his fit for the Patriots defense in the sense that he could be like a Jamie Collins, and maybe that's not what they need. Maybe they need a guy who's going to be a little bit more sound. But I think he's going to do well in Dallas, assuming those character concerns don't, come about down there.
Yeah, you heard some maturity issues with Micah Parsons, like just a guy, like one of those guys that everybody's got this friend that just always seems to get into a fight every time you go out on a Saturday night. That was kind of what you heard about Micah Parsons, is just like, for some reason, every single step along the way, he was just getting himself into mischief and getting not into like crime or anything like that, but just, puffing out his chest and stuff like that and getting into fights and whatnot. And I think that's the concern that a lot of people had. The hazing stuff was obviously a big reason why that was at the top of the list as well. But doesn't surprise me at all that Jerry just said, screw it, where he's too good to pass him up. And, maybe they cleared him with all that off-field stuff too. I mean, none of it was like super bad or anything like that.
Cowboys are fine with it.
With Sean Lee retiring, Jalen Smith being just a horrible use of the salary cap, I think Micah Parsons makes a lot of sense for them, on top of them needing a little bit in the pass rush with Alden Smith moving on. So this pick I think makes a lot of sense for Dallas, especially after being able to add a 3rd-round pick on top of it. I think it does as well open the door for Rashawn Slater for the Chargers, because they need to protect Justin Herbert. I mean, they need multiple players in the offensive line. Could be Slater, Darisaw, or someone like that. And then I don't think the Vikings would take Mac Jones, so I think it's looking like would be available for them at pick 15.
You don't think there's any chance Minnesota does?
I don't think so either. I think that this pick here for the Chargers has got to be Slater or Darisaw, and if you're Minnesota, I think you take the other guy, right? Like whoever they don't take at tackle, I think you just take the other tackle.
You have them about the same.
I would say so. I think Slater is a little bit better athlete than Darisaw was, and in that tape against Chase Young in 2019 is like, I mean, if you want to sell yourself on Rashawn Slater, if you're a Charger fan and they end up making that pick, just watch him, really shut down Chase Young for 4 quarters in that game. Is really, really impressive tackle tape. But at the same time, Darisaw, I remember against North Carolina, and poor Chaz Surratt probably still has nightmares about Christian Darisaw coming up to the second level and just burying him 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. So he's a really physical. That's why I really like Darisaw for the Patriots, is because they like those physical tackles that can really run block. He can certainly do that, and he's got the foot speed in order to be able to be quick and mirror guys on the outside. I think that I think your bold prediction, you should have came into the pre-draft show and made that bold prediction.
I was thinking it. I almost popped in right at the end. I wanted to make it because that was my vibe the whole time. Is they get one of the 5 is there and they pass. So
as far as the fits for these tackles, I think Darisaw makes a lot of sense for the Vikings in a predominantly zone, inside-outside zone blocking system.
I was wondering about Elijah Vera-Tucker for them, because he's a really athletic prospect too for a zone blocking scheme. But yeah, I could see Darisaw doing that as well.
he's also positional versatile as well.
Yeah.
Elijah Vera Tucker is. And then for the Chargers, despite Rashawn Slater's lack of length, I think he's a pure pass protector if he had a little bit longer arms. So some people think he might play guard. I think he's going to end up playing tackle. But as far as his technique goes, I think he's awesome in pass pro, and he makes a lot of sense for the Chargers in protecting Justin Herbert.
Let me ask you guys a question. Now, seeing what's left on the board here heading in with and the Chargers make a pick fast, so we'll see what happens. But assuming it's tackle here, and you're looking at Mac Jones and whatever else is left on the board, if the Patriots are not in on Mac Jones, do you want to see them make this pick or move?
I would like to see them move back. Honestly, they don't get the two corners.
Like you want Mac. Brad's not necessarily sold, but let's say they don't take quarterback. You want to see them go back.
Yeah, because if they don't get the two corners, they don't get Darisaw or Slater.
They didn't get one of the elite guys. Yeah,
they didn't get one of those elite
Parsons. Yeah.
Players, I think you move back. Maybe you take a Zaven Collins. Hey, look, if you move back, Mac Jones might still be there at the pick that you move back to at this point, right? You might be able to get Mac Jones. You look at the draft order. Arizona's not taking a quarterback.
Well, you had Zaven Collins 7 on your big board, right behind Parsons.
Zaven Collins. Yeah. I love Zaven Collins. I think that he would be a great fit for the Patriots. He does everything a Patriot linebacker could possibly do. He is a physical run defender, but really instinctive and makes good reads off the ball against the run. He can drop into coverage. He can rush the passer off the edge or as a blitzer up the middle. He does all of those three things that the Patriots love to do: off the line of scrimmage, on the line of scrimmage, rush the passer, those types of things that they like to move their locations around the front seven, all that kind of stuff.
If you did look at this draft as one where you say you have the 5 quarterbacks, you have a couple of elite level tackles, and then you have the 2 cornerbacks. If every single one is gone except for theoretically Mac Jones, are you not kind of not in tier 2 in terms of talent, but in terms of landing a position of need with an elite player? At that point, taking a linebacker at 15, I don't know.
I think there's one player, and I think it's Kwity Paye, that would be comfortable with at 15, and then after that, prefer a trade down. Beyond, I think they could use extra pass rush. I know they have added Matthew Judon, but I think Kwity Paye is also just the most technically sound run defender at the edge position in the draft class, and that's something the Patriots covet. They could use extra. They could kick inside on passing downs, kind of like Dietrich Wise has done in the past. And him being from Rhode Island, I think he become a fan favorite. It's easy sell for the pick.
Another Michigan guy, bring it.
Another Michigan guy, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Beyond that, and I coached against him when he was in high school. So a little shout out, but beyond that, I think the trade down will make quite a bit of sense.
All right,
Kwity Paye is a really good player for them too. Like Brad said, like you can move him around on the line of scrimmage. I would say probably not the guy you're going to play off the ball, but he reminded me a whole lot of Trey Flowers, right? Somebody that was a little bit of a tweener. Like, is he a stand-up edge or is he a hand-in-the-dirt defensive end? The Patriots tend to not care about that kind of stuff, and they'll just sort of make it work with their scheme. When you get into passing situations on third down, you can put him over the nose. You can put him in the A gap and have him rush over a guard or over the center. You can kick him outside, have him set the edge and rush the passer over the tackle on base downs. He's a really versatile front seven defender. That's a one spot. They added Goudshaw. They re-signed Dietrich Wise, Henry Anderson, Lawrence Guy. They bring all those guys in, but they didn't have like an impact defensive line acquisition other than Matt Judon, if you want to count him. So maybe they do look for a guy like a Kwity Paye.
Slater here.
Slater for the Chargers.
That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm seeing. Slater. Yep.
Makes a lot of sense for them. They need to protect Justin Herbert better. Their offensive line was just atrocious, and I think he is a franchise left tackle. I think Rashawn Slater was right with Penny Sewell for me at the top of the tackle class. Yeah. Very close. I love that pick for them. I think it was very necessary.
This is exactly what teams like Cincinnati and Miami should have done, right? Like they got Justin Herbert there. They know that he's going to be a great quarterback for them. Go and get your blindside protector. Make sure that you keep that quarterback straight up with no injuries, none of that kind of stuff. This is what smart football teams do. They take the offensive linemen. They don't take the flashy wide receivers. They take the offensive linemen. They protect their investment and they build from the inside out. This is exactly what they're supposed to do.
When you have the quarterback, it feels great to take the tackle. It doesn't when you don't, but it's certainly right. You're thrilled here. You have Herbert. The only thing you want here is him upright.
Yeah.
So absolutely,
So we're about to be a couple of picks away, and I just want to say the source that told me earlier in the day that Trey Lance was going 3 to San Francisco, not Mac Jones, is saying that he doesn't think the Patriots are taking a quarterback at 15. So he thinks that they're off quarterback. I don't know. He was right about Trey Lance, so I'll give him kudos there. He was right about Mac Jones falling. That's where my bold prediction came from. Was that that source, and he is saying right now that he feels like the Patriots might be not taking the quarterback here in the first round, which, like we said, they had
I didn't want to be right. I didn't want to be right, Evan.
They had the opportunity.
It's a bold prediction because you expect it to be incorrect, right?
Right. They had the opportunity for Justin Fields. I get that maybe it was a little bit rich for them to trade up if they really didn't like him. Same source said that they felt the Patriots didn't like Justin Fields, just didn't like him, didn't have him in as a first round guy for them on their board. We'll see what they think about Mac Jones here in a couple minutes, I suppose.
I think
if you don't like the quarterback, you got to trade out.
I think you have to trade out, and I think that's the reality. And here's the thing, as you said it, Evan, look, at the end of the day, if they didn't like him, what it would have taken to move up to get him is irrelevant, right? Where you would get frustrated is if you found out that they liked Fields a lot and just weren't willing to pay the price. Because as I said, there is no price that's too high to get the quarterback that you think could lead your franchise for a decade. So if they didn't like him, there's no reason crying about it. It didn't matter that he was sitting there at 11. You're not taking him. They might not have taken him at 15. So it doesn't really matter in that regard. It is just still going to be, who is the quarterback that you want? It's not Cam Newton. How much longer? When are you going to be in a position? Do you expect to be this bad next year where you might be picking in a spot where you have the opportunity to either take a top tier quarterback or trade up for one? You don't have many shots. You don't have many bites at this. This is as close as they're going to get to the top half of the draft, you would think. So I just don't know where you think that quarterback is coming from. This isn't a world in which you can live without that position right now. So I'm a little confused. If you weren't certain you were fine with Mac Jones at 15 and you end up being right, Evan, or, and they don't take someone here, I'm having a difficult time understanding the strategy.
Me too. I'm right there.
So the one thing that I'll say is, if you want them to trade out, there does have to be a player for the team to trade up to acquire. Is that Mac Jones? Is Washington or New Orleans, or do they value Mac Jones that highly enough to trade up to acquire him? Before my bold prediction was the Patriots trade out of the first round with the Jags. Is there a player for the Jaguars to trade up to acquire? Is that Elijah Vera-Tucker, the offensive lineman from USC? I don't know if that guy is there at this moment. Maybe it's a Kwity Paye. But there also has to be that guy. It's either really Mac Jones or bust. I don't see a team trading up with the Patriots
Jets
right now.
Traded up. The Jets just traded up to 14.
Traded up to 14. I haven't.
Well, they're not taking
a position player worth trading up for.
So they're not trading for Mac Jones.
No.
This one is a head scratcher. I guess we'll see who they end up taking. I don't know if there's a defensive player that the Jets.
Who are you trading up for here?
Darrisaw is still on the board, right? So maybe they're trading up for the tackle.
Getting the tackle. You got your quarterback. You want your tackle, I guess. Do it all in one shot.
I guess so. I mean John, you're going to get it. I mean, you're going to get
it. They have Mekhi Becton.
Yeah.
They have Mekhi Becton. So they're looking for a right tackle.
I don't know.
Did Darrisaw play on the right side at all?
He did a little bit, and there are, I could see Darrisaw fitting in just fine on the right side. I mean, obviously it's an adjustment, but it's not one that I think that gets a little bit overrated sometimes. I think you can flip it pretty easily.
Also have Chuma Adoga over there. They traded for George Fant. I don't know. This would be really interesting. Is it a receiver? Is it a weapon for Zach Wilson? That could be a possibility too.
Darius Toney.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean,
I don't know. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because what you're pretty certain of is, and again, Mac Jones is available to the Patriots at 15, and really all that matters is whether or not they're going to take him.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
John, are you back, John?
Am I?
Yeah, Mac Jones will be available for the Patriots at 15. That's what he wanted to say, and that's definitely true now. I mean,
Can you guys got me back? I had a little glitch there.
Yeah.
Right. Didn't matter with the Jets. Really, the Patriots are on the clock right now, and Mac Jones is available. And so I'm looking in the chat. You guys want him or not? What do you think?
I already said it. I don't know where the quarterback comes from. If this is the scenario where none of us really envisioned it until the last couple of days, the Mac Jones would literally fall into your lap and you wouldn't even have to give it anything up to go get him. And it just feels to me like, where's the quarterback coming from if it's not Mac Jones here? You know, where you're going to get Kyle Trask? You're going to sell this fan base on Kellen Mond? Are you going to go get Jimmy G? I mean, are those the paths? I mean, is that what you want? I don't know. I still take Mac Jones over all of those guys. Do I love the value of 15? Not particularly, but at the same time, it's the quarterback.
Would you have loved? Here's the thing. I'll ask you guys. Would you have loved the value of Mac Jones again? Because it comes down to, if you like him, it doesn't really matter where. Would you have liked the value of Mac Jones at pick 25?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of where I had him at the end of the college football season. I thought if they could
there's
get
no real difference if you think he's your guy. If you're drafting him to be your starter at 25 or 15, and right now the only thing you have in the to back it up is Cam Newton, it doesn't matter. If you like him, the value, I think, is irrelevant at this point.
So the Jets have taken Elijah Vera-Tucker, it looks like. Tackle / guard from USC. Maybe he's going to fit on the inside next to Mekhi Becton.
Yeah.
Putting the Patriots with the possibility of drafting Mac Jones. And the two guys that we've previously mentioned over the last few minutes are Kwity Paye, the edge from Michigan, and Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle from Virginia Tech, are both there as well. That could be in this range and potential needs for the Patriots.
Oh boy, what are we gonna do here, guys?
Oh man.
Let's see. All I'm doing is refreshing Twitter to see them say that the Patriots traded the pick.
Now I will say that you previously asked, is that I was trying to bring up the point that there has to be a player worth trading up for. And I think between Kwity Paye and Christian Darrisaw, maybe even Jalen Phillips, there are those guys available that a team could be aggressive, and Mac Jones, a team could be aggressive enough to trade up with the Patriots for this pick. So if they do decide to trade down, there should be some good value in that haul. I don't know what is going to happen though.
I don't know what's going to happen either. We're speechless at this point. We've basically talked for 2 straight hours and we don't know what to say right now.
2/3 and the 23rd overall pick for pick 14. Oh man.
Oh, Evan, are you talking? Did you lose Evan?
Evan, click M.
Brad, can you hear Evan?
I cannot.
Evan, we can't hear you. Did you mute yourself by accident? We've lost you completely. Yeah, leave and come back, and Brad and I will just sit here and stare at each other until the Patriots trade the pick.
So, what do you want Mac Jones? I don't think you've answered that question.
Like I said, I want to know that there's a plan. I simply want to know if there's a plan at quarterback. It can't be Cam Newton. This could be the long con, and it's been Jimmy all along, and they just wait him out until San Fran trades. It's a day 3 trade, and they're fine with it. Maybe. But again, I was not a Mac Jones guy. I wasn't. I'm more in your school here. I'm fine, I guess. But I was with you. I was ready to sell out for Fields.
I
Evan,
believe this might be breaking news, but I believe the Patriots just took Mac Jones at pick 15.
I believe the Patriots just took Mac Jones at pick 15 as well, and I just tweeted it out that they took Mac Jones at 15. So
there it is.
I believe that is it. That's going to be the pick. I am stunned, and I really did not think that the Patriots were going to be able to stay here at 15 and get their pick. and get their player. And like I said, I guess Mac Jones was their guy all along, and that's pretty stunning. I really,
yeah,
I really,
it's amazing.
I really wasn't sure that this was going to be the pick. I coming into the draft cycle, it made so much sense to see Mac Jones in a Patriot uniform in terms of some of the cerebral things that he was able to do in the pocket, the accuracy, the footwork, the mechanics, the quick eyes, as I just described earlier. But it really felt like he wasn't somebody that was going to elevate it for them, that was going to take it to the next level. But obviously they feel like it is. And I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what to say, because it's a pick that you're excited to get that next quarterback. You're excited that they were able to land the QB of the future in the first round. This is what everybody wanted it to be. We had all sort of gotten ourselves on the Justin Fields, Trey Lance, selling ourselves on that upside, selling ourselves on all of that good stuff that we saw from those quarterback prospects. But Mac Jones is the type of passer that has succeeded in the Brady mold and the Jimmy G mold. This is their type of guy. This is the traditional Patriot type of guy. The other thing I will say, my guess is that Bill Belichick won't start a rookie quarterback week one, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Mac Jones is the guy that starts week one. I mean, I think he's ready to go.
I wouldn't either. And to answer Brad's question from earlier, whether I want Mac Jones or not, again, I'm never at any point in time going to pretend to be an expert in these matters at all. My philosophy when it comes to the Patriots is I want them to want the person they took. So that's why you always like to see them make a move up. They see a person they like and you go for it. For better or for worse, that's what matters. Is I liked this guy. So for all we know, the Patriots might have taken Mac Jones at 5 overall, and he might be their number 2 quarterback on the board. And they're absolutely giddy right now that they got him. And if that's the case, great. If that's who you want and that's who you think fits, and in your mind's eye, you had built a lot of what you were doing in and around the offseason with the idea that you might be able to land a player like this or a quarterback with his skill set, and that's what you're looking for, then great. I also want to say, have fun, San Francisco. At this point, you whatever leverage you wanted to have, whatever you wanted to do with Jimmy G, you just lost all of that, I guess. So I do wonder if San Francisco, I wonder, had San Fran played it different and said, this is pointless. We'll take a 6th round pick and just take Jimmy off our hands. What would have happened here? I don't really know. But Evan, you way prefer this over the Plan B Jimmy G scenario. Do you prefer Do you prefer it over the round 2 Kellen Mond scenario?
Absolutely. I mean, I really think that Mac Jones is a step above all of those quarterbacks, and to me, it wasn't 100% another Jared Stidham situation, but it was sort of in the same ballpark. If you take a guy like a Kyle Trask or a Kellen, especially if you take somebody like Davis Mills or Jamie Newman, right? Now we're really starting to throw darts at the position. And I think with Mac Jones, you at least have a quarterback that I feel like right now has the makeup and has the physical
Look at this guy.
ability to be able to.
He's strutting right now. He's strutting.
To be able to get a starting caliber quarterback. I think that you were projecting those other day 2 guys to potentially be a starter. I think Mac Jones is a starter. And you get a guy that, again, with Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, we know the relationship. We know how far back this thing goes with those 2 guys. I don't think that Nick Saban would have told Bill Belichick to take Mac Jones in the first round if Nick Saban didn't feel like Mac Jones was going to do what it takes to be great. If he wasn't going to put in the work, if he wasn't going to study the film, if he wasn't going to break down the opponent, all that kind of stuff. If he didn't do all that stuff, then Nick Saban would have told Bill pass, right? And he didn't. He told him to take him.
There's a few fallout. There's quite a big fallout from this pick on top of it. I think clearly, like you said, this closes the door on Jimmy Garoppolo. On top of that, it probably closes the door on Jared Stidham in New England. I don't see them keeping him as the 3rd string quarterback. Maybe they continue to, but really the idea that he has a chance to start this season is definitely out the door. On top of that, I think it in a way justifies their actions in free agency to surround whoever was going to be a quarterback with better weapons. You get 2 tight ends, you get multiple wide receivers, and you're improving the situation. Maybe it was going to be for Cam Newton, but I think they clearly had a plan at all times. a backup plan at all times. And this isn't going to be, if Mac Jones is a starter in week 1, this isn't him throwing to the Patriots 2020 weapons. This is a completely revamped offense. And it's going to give him a chance to succeed if he is that rookie starter.
Yeah, I think if you look ahead to day 2 now too, and you look at pick 46, the Patriots, one of the things that Alabama had a lot of was speed, obviously, at the wide receiver position. The Pats add Nelson Aguilar, who's a very fast receiver, but I would love to see them at 46 entertain somebody like a Tony or a Rondell Moore or Amari Rodgers, somebody that they can scheme open close to the line of scrimmage and have him create with the ball in his hands like Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith did so well at Alabama with Mac Jones. Because as we talked about, a lot of the appeal of Mac Jones is that quick decision making and that ability to get the ball into guys' hands with good accuracy and anticipation and understanding how to get those guys into yak and into yards after the catch. Now they need to get some more yards after the catch receivers. They got Jonnu Smith, who is kind of, obviously as a tight end, but can obviously create with the ball in his hand as well. I would love to see them get that speedy gadget type of player now on day 2 in the draft, and there's plenty of them. Kind of pick your choice of whoever gets out of the first round here tonight. I think that's sort of the next step here, because you take a quarterback in the first round, you got the offensive line for the most part figured out. Maybe you still need to take a developmental tackle to fill in in 2022, but you specifically need to make sure that you have an offense that fits the type of quarterback that Mac Jones is, because he is not somebody that's going to push the ball down the field a ton and wow you with arm talent and mobility and all these other tools. So you've got to be able to get guys pace and space, right? You got to be able to get guys the ball in their hands and let them create for Mac Jones the things that he doesn't necessarily do well. And that's going to have to be an Amari Rodgers, a Tony, a Moore, even a guy like a Dwayne Eskridge potentially, or Jalen Darden later on. Someone like that can sort of run with the football to get to those scheme touches that Alabama likes so much.
Like you said, there's a bunch of those guys, even Elijah Moore on top of that.
I don't know if he'll make it out of the first round tonight, but yeah, if he does, I mean, that'd be at the top of the list.
And another, we were kind of saying maybe they trade out of this and acquire more picks. Tomorrow night, thinking about surrounding Mac Jones with talent, they have pick 46, but they don't draft again until pick 96. So is now their second round pick expendable in the sense that they want to trade down and add value before, so they don't have a 50 pick stretch without a selection? I think it increases the potential that they trade of that second round pick, because they're just sat there at pick 15 and selected.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still kind of stunned that they actually took Mac Jones. I don't know. I mean, look, give Bill Belichick and the staff a lot of credit, though, for creating that Justin Fields smokescreen. Everybody thought that the Patriots were super high on Justin Fields. Yeah. That was what everybody thought, and they were able to kind of hype that up enough that their guy just fell to them at 15 without them even having to trade up for him.
And again, for what it's worth, and was talking to Greg earlier today, and this is something he'd written at BSJ, but without saying it, his vibe was there was outside of Lawrence, which was obviously not happening. There were 2 guys the Patriots would have been interested in if they had shots at them, and that was Wilson and Jones. And it wasn't Lance, and it wasn't Fields, and that they wouldn't take them even if they were there at 15. That's kind of what he was hinting at. Whether or not you guys agree with that assessment, the Patriots, I think, definitely liked Mac Jones more than the guys taken ahead of him. And it's obvious, because if they, as we said, and we've seen the Patriots trade up for the player that they want several times in a draft. If Fields was their guy, they get Fields. They clearly liked Mac Jones better than the players taken ahead of him, and they got him at 15. At that very least, you have to be happy about that. Whether or not the player fits, that's going to be, or what kind of NFL career he has, that's obviously, what we have to wait and see.
He fits like a glove. The question is does he have enough physical talent to make it special? To make him a really special NFL quarterback, a special talent in the league. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Deshaun Watson. He's not Justin Fields. He doesn't have that those physical abilities. But at the same time, he has a lot of the small things. And some of the things that I wrote about when I wrote about him way back when was he just does a lot of the little things well. When you talk about the position, getting the ball out quickly, looking through reads fast, moving around in the pocket, understanding defenses and how to read coverage, all these types of things, right? All these little things, these dedicated behind the scenes. These are the things that you talk about with Mac Jones. Okay, maybe he didn't have the arm talent that Justin Fields had. Maybe he doesn't have the ball of clay that Trey Lance is, but he has all of these little cerebral quarterback aspects of it. And when you talk about those things and you're the Patriots and you're coming off of Tom Brady, that was the type of guy Tom Brady was, right? Tom Brady wasn't the toolsy prospect. He was the type of guy that made it with all those other intangible qualities. I'm not saying Mac Jones is going to be as good as Tom Brady, obviously, but
he had a bigger arm.
Clearly, that's how they sort of feel that that's what they prioritized in this draft at the position, was somebody that checked those cerebral little things boxes a little bit more than maybe somebody that had the great arm talent in the 4.4 40 and all that kind of stuff.
So a couple things. Number one, the Cardinals took Zaven Collins at pick number 16.
Yeah.
Not sure if you saw that.
Yep.
Potential Patriots target. Second one, Evan, do you think today that Mac Jones is a better professional quarterback than Cam Newton?
I feel like if I say no, then people are going to kill me for saying that in the chat. I
don't think he is. For the record.
I think that Cam Newton has the ability to bring more to the table, certainly, with the arm and with his mobility. I think Mac Jones is a better, more natural fit for the Patriots than Cam Newton ever was. And I felt like at times last year, and maybe they could get away from this if they stuck with Cam Newton and they really committed, or they went with the Trey Lance or Justin Fields and they really dove into the other parts of offensive football and built the scheme around that type of passer. But if they were going to stick with the Brady era playbook with that type of offense, then it always felt like they were kind of forcing a round hole in a square peg with Cam. It kind of felt like the things that Cam did well never lined up with the things that made the Patriots offense good. Consistent ball placement, quick through the reads, things like that. He just didn't do those things as well as they needed them to do, a quarterback to do them for the offense to be good last year. And there were a million reasons why the offense wasn't good last year, but that was up there. Mac Jones does all those things well. Now, they have to, like I said, they need to start getting playmakers around him. I think that now on day 2, they need to invest in another wide receiver because Mac Jones isn't going to be able to move around. He's not going to be able to extend plays. He's not going to be able to throw guys open at all 3 levels of the field like a Justin Fields would. So they need to get guys that can create with the football. That's the next step. If they come back tomorrow and they draft Amari Rodgers, they draft Elijah Moore, or they draft Rondell Moore, or they draft Dwayne Eskridge, something like that, I think that this begins to make a lot of sense to me, and I can get on board with it. I'm still stunned that they actually took a quarterback in the first round. I'm still stunned that it was Mac Jones. But I think to answer your question, that's a long answer. But to answer your question, I think right now Cam Newton brings more to the table physically than Mac Jones does. But I think that Mac Jones is a better fit for the Patriots.
See, I think that ultimately you're talking the first month of the season. And that's a very narrow scope. You're probably a better football team with Cam Newton as your quarterback. But if you broaden the scope to the entire season, now you can sell me on Mac Jones being better. And if that is the case, if he can develop over the course of a 17-game rookie season, then you would want to start him early on in his career in week 1. But I do believe that that Cam Newton will be around this year, and that regardless of who starts, that conversation is going to be had. If Mac Jones comes out and he's the starter and he struggles early on, he might get turned on quickly, and people are going to say, "Hey, maybe Cam Newton could do this." But the same conversation is going to be had if Cam Newton plays poorly in the first quarter of week 1.
Yeah, exactly.
The first drive, people are going to be yelling for Mac Jones. So it's going to be an interesting conversation because there are some people who defend Cam and there are some who are against him, and whoever is starting, there's always going to be that. If you have 2 quarterbacks, that's always going to be some type of conversation.
I'm always jacked up for training camp, but now I am super jacked up for training camp because you're going to get to see Mac Jones for the first time. And I don't know. I think he could be the best quarterback on the field right away. Right. I think there's a chance that he is. And the Patriots are going to have an interesting decision to make at that point. History tells us that it can go either way with starting the quarterback, your rookie, right away. Right. Sometimes it works out. And it turns into, the guy's just so good that it doesn't matter. He kind of transcends it. But I don't know if Mac Jones is that good. Maybe it does behoove him to sit a little bit. But you do have to think about the long term of the player, right? And with now you got Mac Jones, you have to think about the long term and think about, okay, what, is this the best thing to throw him to the fire right away? Or is it better to kind of ease him into it? You're right, though. I'm sure that there's going to be rumblings out of training camp from the beat reporters, from people that come out to the camp, and sit in the stands. There are going to be preseason games this year. We're going to see it all. And if Mac Jones is out playing Cam Newton, then it's clearly going to be that the fans are going to be clamoring for Mac Jones to start week 1. I think it's sort of, it's interesting because, like, if you go into it too, looking at the Justin Fields trade for Chicago, would you have rather Justin Fields, or do you want Mac Jones and keeping your future picks, right? That's going to be another thing. John, you talked about it when they made the Justin Fields pick, and we're going to look back on this and compare. We're going to compare Justin Fields and Mac Jones for their entire careers.
Could you have done this? Yeah.
Was it the right move to not give up what it would have taken to get up to Justin Fields? Was it the right move to settle on Mac?
If what we were hearing, that Fields wasn't even on their radar, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because if Fields was there at 15 along with Jones and they were still taking Jones, then it's not worth discussing whether or not they should have given more assets up to move a player that they really didn't like in the first place. I think that's what's evident. I think it's very clear based on how this went down. They preferred Jones, and they did not want to move up. They didn't want Fields, period. So they certainly weren't going to spend any draft capital to get him.
Yeah.
So again, I think that's it. I think as a Patriots fan, that's what you have to feel best about. And when Brad asked me, like, what do I think? He was their guy. So you hope they're right at this point. But they clearly liked him, and liked him better than the alternatives. And if you want to feel good about another thing, they clearly played this draft right, because they didn't freak out and they didn't move. And if this was a guy and they looked at everything in front of them and they said, I think we're going to get him here. And they did. And they read the board right. They got their guy at 15 without having to move. So at this point, you just have to hope they're right.
Yeah. And that was really it, because they had conversations with a lot of teams in the top 10 about moving up. And the Patriots decided to just kind of let the dust settle and see sort of how it came to them and how the draft shook out. They talked about moving up to 4. They talked about moving up to 8. They had real conversations about moving up for the quarterbacks. And it was always Mac Jones. That was always the guy that they wanted. And
apparently, yeah.
And that's the Justin Fields thing was smokescreen, draft smokescreen. And given the fact that the source that I had spoken to said that Trey Lance was going 3 to the 49ers and the Patriots wanted Mac Jones, and that's exactly what happened. He told me that they didn't have Justin Fields as a first-round quarterback. They didn't feel like
Who did not?
The Patriots. The Patriots did not feel comfortable taking Justin Fields in the first round. That's what he had told me. And since he was right about all the rest of it, I trust him and think that he's probably right about this. So
that's where it seemed to swing in the last day. That the Field stuff was obviously a smokescreen, and they weren't even remotely interested. So
the draft selection of Jarrett Stidham in the 4th round makes a lot of sense if they're evaluating QBs and don't get a first round grade on Justin Fields, because that's bad. I mean, that's really, really bad. Drafting Jarrett Stidham was bad enough after watching him in Mobile. Couldn't hit water from a boat. And if you're looking at Justin Fields and you don't think he's a first round caliber quarterback, like if you're pick 31 and you wouldn't be comfortable taking him, I mean, that's just really poor QB evaluation. I know that they're the NFL guys and they're the scouts, sure, and they have more information, but I think if you watched him play, all you have to do is watch the Clemson game, but you can watch every other game too. His game against Penn State week 1 this year, 2019 against Michigan, the college football playoff against Clemson the year before. This is a clear first round quarterback. And I think regardless if
he went 11, so yeah, most people thought so.
Right. They had any interest in him or not in the first round, maybe we can have that conversation down the line. But that's just really, really bad, I think. And that's
So-
just confirming the fact that they made a bad call on Jarrett Stidham as well.
So I think that the one thing I will say to play devil's advocate on that is that a lot of the reason why people didn't feel in New England that Justin Fields was a first-round quarterback wasn't about stuff that on the field, right? It wasn't about talent. It wasn't about physical ability. The rumors that you had heard were about off the field, not off the field, but just work ethic, drive, demeanor, those types of things that
I heard people messing with his delivery. I mean,
there's some mechanical stuff. That stuff I think can all be fixed and figured out, right? So I don't put too much stock in that. What I think that they care about is Cam Newton is one of these guys, and that's why they've loved Cam so much. Is he going to be there at 4 a.m. every single morning? Is he going to be there? Is he going to be the guy in the film room way after practice till 8, 9 o'clock at night with the quarterback's coach? Is he going to be the guy out on the practice field every single day, leading and being the hardest working guy out there and understanding defense and understanding offensive scheme and understanding all these types of little things that they look for? And I think that they thought that Mac Jones check those boxes more than Justin Fields. And I think that that's where the concerns with Fields came from, valid or not. And we're going to find out how he plays in Chicago, whether or not they were valid. Oh. And I do think that we could look back on this and easily in a couple of years and say that they made the wrong decision. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's, I think, where it came from, less so of let's watch this guy's tape and compare the two tapes.
Couple other questions. How can this work? Can Cam play the role of backup mentor here? Is there a chance Cam's not on the roster if they're certain that he's going to be, that Mac's going to be the opening day starter?
So if they're not certain that Mac is going to be the opening day starter and they want a bridge to Mac Jones, I'm not sure Cam Newton is necessarily the bridge to Mac Jones that you want, right? I mean, they're on totally different planets in terms of their playing style and how they're going to be successful. Jarrett Stidham's obviously not the answer as the bridge or even as like a spot starter to begin the season. If Jimmy Garoppolo gets cut, you do wonder.
You wouldn't be stunned, right?
You do wonder if Jimmy G is the guy that they turn to be that sort of bridge to Mac. But to me, I think that you roll with Cam for the first couple of weeks of the season. I think Mac Jones is going to be able to start pretty early on. That's the whole appeal of him, right? Is that he's this guy that is already pro ready. Like that's what you hear from everybody. That's what you hear from all the scouts. Like that's the narrative, right? Whether it's true or not, that's the narrative. Is that this is the most pro ready quarterback in the draft. If all of that is true, then it shouldn't really matter. Right, and they should be able to get to Mac Jones pretty quickly.
While that's true and could be true, maybe it is. He is the most pro-ready quarterback. History tells us, not necessarily the Patriots, but just NFL draft-wise. They said the same thing about Baker Mayfield, and he came into the league after being a redshirt senior, and Tyrod Taylor was starting in week 1.
Oh, yeah.
That's not always. If there is a potential bridge quarterback that the team has, then in the Patriots that could be Cam Newton, then history tells us they prefer not to start the rookie because they feel the pressures of week 1 and the whole season ahead of them and all this stuff, and it's better to bench them for a few games, maybe get to the bye week depending on when that bye week lines up. If it's week 5 or 6 and you get the bridge, and then you allow the rookie 2 weeks to prepare for a game and then get them rolling. So I think that even if he is the most pro-ready, NFL history tells us that not necessarily meaning he's going to start week 1. I think keeping Cam Newton around is a great idea. I think Cam is too. I don't think he's going to pout or complain if he ends up being the backup. I don't think he's that type of guy. I know that would be a new role for him, but he seemed to still be engaged in the games when Jarrett Stidham was playing last season, and even after he was benched, it seemed like he was still involved. And I think he's above being upset or whatever. He can accept that role, I think.
I do too, Brad, but I think, as you said, it's going to get ugly fast for Kim. Because I don't think you'd be hard pressed to find a single Patriots fan that was happy that he was retained. They understood it of okay, you can't enter free agency with you'll be throwing to someone. You had to have somebody in the fold. You had to have insurance in case nothing broke your way. So I get it.
Players like Cam Newton.
And players liked him. So there's good reasons why you understand why they did it. But you'd be hard pressed to find a person that wanted Cam Newton to be the starter when the Patriots took the field the following season. And if he does, you're right. It's going to be knives out almost right away. People are almost going to want him to fail because they're not going to want to see any more of what they saw last year. I guess there's a chance that all of the things people were able to talk themselves into when they did retain him, that a year under the system and blah, 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 and all this and that. And maybe you see a different version of him and it is more palatable, if not something that actually is decent. And then you feel okay waiting on Jones. But you're right. The teeniest little hiccup, the first ground ball he throws to an open receiver, and Baker just allowed a full friggin' stadium full of fans, so it's not going to be in an empty stadium where you can't hear it. It's going to get ugly fast. I think people are not going to be able to endure what the Patriots went through last year at the quarterback position. Whether it's from Newton or Jones, it's going to be rough for both. Jones will have more rope for sure, but he comes in and he starts, the pressure is going to be legit right out of the gates because this is a team that people expect to compete and get back to the playoffs next year. This isn't your average top 5 team gets a quarterback, throws him in early on, and it's okay, I'll take my lumps. But if we get our momentum going at the end of the year and start to see some improvement, watch out for year 2. Someone's got to play well at quarterback almost right out of the gate for the Patriots. They're not giving away the first 4 to 6 games of the season.
I think personally, the best interest of the team long-term and the best interest of Mac Jones' career long-term is to have him sit a little bit. But the way that you hear everything you hear about this guy in terms of his work ethic, in terms of what's between the ears, I don't think it's going to take much for him to grasp the playbook and be able to be up to speed in order to play right away. But I still think starting camp for the first couple of weeks of the year is what's best for everybody, just so you ease them into it. You don't want to throw them too much into the fire, but you take a guy 15th overall at the quarterback position, he's starting for year 1. I mean, Jordan Love is the first quarterback to not start for his team as a rookie, as a first-round pick in like 10 years or something like that. So if you draft a quarterback here at 15, Mac Jones is going to play next year, whether it's by the bye week, whether it's by week 3, week 4, week 1, he's going to play next year. He's your quarterback. He's the starting quarterback of the New England Patriots. It's that simple.
The only way, conceivably, I would go back to the Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith, relationship where everyone knew Patrick Mahomes would eventually take over, but Smith just balled that entire season and got them to the playoffs. That's the only way that it would be possible that Jones sits for an extent like the entire season, extended period of time. Like you said, there's going to be a plan likely if Cam Newton is a week 1 starter, that week 5, 6, 7, if the bye week's somewhere in there as well, that they're eventually going to turn to Mac Jones unless Cam Newton has, 3 touchdowns a game and no picks and, just is just killing it. But I think that is completely unlikely to expect, unfair to expect.
Right.
Cam Newton is starting for a handful of games for the Patriots. I just – again, not only the fact that you took him where you took him, but the reason why the Patriots fell in love with Mac Jones is because of everything that he does so well in terms of his makeup and mental process and all these types of things, the preparation, the ability to read a defense, the ability to get the ball out quickly, and just sort of this kind of cerebral aspect that everybody talks about, pre-snap reads of the defense, pre-snap indicators, getting man zone indicators, then understanding where his options are off of that to make quick decisions with the football. You don't draft a guy if you wanted the guy to sit and you wanted the guy to groom and to work on and to develop. That's Justin Fields, right? Then you would have drafted Justin Fields. If you want the guy to come in right away, that you drop the quarterback in from above and say we're a playoff team, let's roll. That's why you draft Mac Jones. That's why he's here. So he's here to be the quarterback that gets dropped in from the sky as a rookie and is able to come into a ready-made offense and defense and football team that won 7 games last year after a shitstorm of things happened, right? In terms of Brady leaving, COVID hitting, Cam Newton comes in late, gets COVID mid-season, the whole team gets COVID mid-season. All these things happen. They still won 7 games. The Patriots probably feel like right now with Mac Jones, they're 11-12 win football team. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be how it pans out, but I just feel like you don't draft this type of prospect and have him sit. There's just no reason for it. So
you think realistically, you think Justin Fields is not pro ready?
I do. I think he's pro ready. I think all that kind of stuff is just like, I don't even know, like just craziness, right? But I think in terms of those are the types of QBs, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, even a guy like last year, like a Jordan Love, like we talked about in the pre-draft show, Brad. Like those are the types of guys that you sit and develop, that you sit behind a veteran starter and you let them, kind of ease into it. I think Justin Fields is someone that can start right away, or not right away, but year one, by your bye week 8, 9, something like that. Put him in by Halloween, that type of thing. But you get a guy like Mac Jones who doesn't have that physical tool and that physical ability. He better have the smarts to be able to play right away. Like he better have that feel and that innate ability and those instincts and that football IQ to get on the field right away. Because if he doesn't, then why did you draft him?
It's one of the guys from my basketball, one of the guys from our Celtics postgame show leaked in here. So I had to give Swaggy some love.
Okay.
I'm with you, Swaggy. He's useless.
I gotta admit,
70% of our chat is about Grant Williams, regardless of what happens in the game.
If we do 10 seconds on the Celtics, I am like, it's tough for me to watch him at this point. It really is. I struggle to watch.
Some of my Celtics guys leaked in here for sure, and that's Swaggy. Swaggy was one, but Grant is a target there. So guys, I want to put a bow on it. Here, and well, I'll promise everybody at home, we'll jump back in if the Patriots trade back into the first round. But they made their pick, number 15. We're going to get to hear from him soon, Evan. So I know you're going to want to be in on that as well. And then, if anything happens, we'll jump back out there. But guys, any closing thoughts here or anything on this? I have one I'd like to share, but you guys go.
Yeah, I think there's one interesting dynamic that could be talked about. We've covered Mac Jones and his skill set and his potential fit. There could be a little bit of the Taysom Hill effect with Cam Newton. I guess there is also the potential that they play both quarterbacks at times. Maybe Cam gets, a few snaps here or there, while Mac Jones takes over the offense and builds a system around him. If they're in, 3rd and 2 and you want to just put Cam behind Jakob Johnson and go get that first down on QB. So I guess that could always be the option. Some thought that I had, maybe it does turn into something like that. But ultimately, the Patriots take a quarterback who I don't love, but I think that it is a nice thought to think the Patriots have a future at the position, which I think everyone in the fan base was hoping for tonight.
I think that's what you have to come away with this, is that the Patriots have their quarterback of the future. We've talked about this for really since Tom Brady left, as who's going to be the successor, who's going to be the next quarterback in New England, and whether you like Mac Jones as a prospect or not, and we're going to probably break this down 17 million different ways over the next 6 months and even into Mac Jones's career. They got a quarterback of the future, and we can commit to saying, hey, Mac Jones is the Patriots guy, and we can have some fun with that, and we can see how his career pans out. And again, I think what sold them on Mac Jones was the little things that he does well, the pocket movement, the pre-snap and post-snap reads, that he can quickly process a defense, that he can get through a read, that he can teach offense to other people and understand scheme, and really has everything that you look for between the ears for a quarterback, and is accurate to all 3 levels from inside the pocket, and has good pocket movement within the framework of the scheme as well. So not the athlete, not the big arm, not any of those types of things, but really a Brady Garoppolo style quarterback for the Patriots. And they're going back to that sort of offense, right? They're going to be that sort of offense that they were at the beginning of the Brady era, where they were this, quick decision, get the ball out, throw it accurately, put it in the right places, that type of scheme. And that's going to be what they're going to be again with Mac Jones.
Yeah. And I just doubling down on that, Evan, I agree. It's you wanted a quarterback. You wanted the Patriots to address the quarterback situation. They've addressed the quarterback situation. Now it's just hoping they were right in their assessment of the player. And that's all it comes down to at this point. And they got the guy they wanted, and that counts for something. So there's a lot of people. This is a really split. You can tell in the chats. You can tell on Twitter right now. It's pretty split, but you have to feel good about the fact that the biggest thing hanging over the Patriots' head right now was, what are you going to do about the quarterback position? They picked earlier in a draft than they're accustomed to picking, and they used that on a quarterback. That's a big deal. And they got a guy they absolutely wanted. They absolutely wanted to have. So I think that's the best takeaway from this at all. I can talk myself into this. I think it wasn't necessarily the player I wanted, and I'm not just doing the in Bill we trust sort of thing. But I always do like it when their evaluations, this is a guy that they really wanted to have, and they got him, where they were drafting without having to give.
They didn't have to move up. I think that's
and they didn't have to move up.
Yeah.
They let the draft come to them, and they got the guy they wanted, and that's so. Everything went to their plan. You just see whether that plan's going to work.
That's, I think, the biggest thing out of it. Just one last final thought is that they didn't have to trade up, right? They didn't have to give up a whole boatload of assets to go and get the guy. And what I wrote about Mac Jones in January, right after the college football playoff and championship, it was obvious why he fit. Like, it was obvious why he, as a thrower and as a stylistic passer, it's obvious that his style matched up with the Patriots style. But I just felt like, how could you trade up for a player like this? How could you trade up for a player that skill set? The fact that they were able to just sit back and get him at 15 and not have to do anything fancy to get him in the building, it makes a whole lot of sense that they felt like he was a system fit, he was a culture fit, and they didn't have to get aggressive to get the quarterback, and here we are.
And then you can flip hit a first next year for Aaron Rodgers. And,
there you go. Problem solved.
Who says no? Happy. Who says no, right? Anyway, so like I said, we'll wrap it up, but we'll jump back. I promise if anything happens, we'll have more stuff on our YouTube channel later on tonight. We'll break down, the whole first round. Evan and I will talk about the pick. We might get Alex back in the mix. Maybe Greg joins us. Who knows? It'll be a party. But in the meantime, we've been here for 2+ hours. So I want to thank Brad, for Kelly for joining us and being here all night long, an hour pregame and sitting here for 2+ hours.
Brad right now, I think
he's a sad Brad. I know it was
Waddle to the Dolphins hurts equally as
okay. So Brad, let me ask you this real quick.
That was another binky of mine. Waddle would have been anyway.
So Kadarius Toney just went 20 to the New York Giants, so he's off the board. Let's assume that Bateman and Elijah Moore go before the end of the night. I think that's a safe assumption. Who is the day 2 wide receiver that pairs best with Mac Jones?
Rondale Moore from Purdue.
Yeah. I like it.
He's a playmaker. He's undersized, but he's strong. He's explosive. He's fast. He had like a 42-inch vertical, just great after the catch. Gets open quick underneath. You can use him on jet sweeps, and I think that his fit would make a lot of sense in the Patriots. His fit around the weapons the Patriots already have makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do get concerned about the injuries, but I feel like, in the second round, he's a first-round talent that's going to go in the second round because of the injuries. Those are the types of risks you like to take. I said it. They need to get one of those guys that can create with the ball in their hands.
Who else do you like? Do you like Rodgers?
I love Amari Rodgers
as well. He's another one I think that's there potentially. The guy from USC as well.
I think I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love his craftiness and his route running ability. I don't think he's the yak receiver that they necessarily need. I really feel like you look at that Alabama offense.
Or if you go big, there's Marshall, right? The guy from LSU.
Yeah, Terrace Marshall, Jalen Darden, Dwayne Eskridge. If you want to go later,
I think Diami Brown will be another option at pick 4.
Diami Brown,
But is that a position you want to address here? Because we did talk about cornerback and tackle. At what point does the tackle pool dry up here, where you're getting a guy who's starting? A starting caliber player.
John, I got to jump out. Mac Jones is literally about to talk right now.
Guys, we're wrapping it. Evan's going to go. We're going to jump in, listen to Mac Jones. We'll jump in later. Thank you very much for joining us. Jump on our YouTube channel later on for more stuff. Brad Kelly, John Zannis, Evan Lazar just started out. Patriots select a quarterback. Everybody